Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 11th of June. Today, another one bites the dust. A third Tory MP has resigned, throwing the party into chaos. Can Rishi Sunak survive another attack from his own side? Manchester City have won their first ever Champions League and the treble after a 1-0 win over Inter Milan last night.
Donald Trump has branded the federal indictment against him as ridiculous and baseless. Will this stop him from running to try and be the next US president? And a spaceport in the Shetlands is shaping up nicely ahead of the UK's first ever vertical rocket launch this summer. Are you looking forward to it like we are?
Oh, yes, we certainly are. Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I like the way our space race is hotting up a little bit over here.
It. Yeah, I didn't know we were building a spaceport in the Shetlands.
No.
News to me.
No, but we've got Andy Lound on, our favourite spaceman, a little bit later on, so he can explain all. It's not going to be like a massive rocket like they have in the States.
Won't it?
No.
Well, won't be a manned rocket for a start. But
it's something.
It's a start. It's quite exciting.
Yeah.
And the other thing we're going to be talking about is, would you ever sell your wedding dress? Because Katie Price is going to. Do you remember it? It was this amazing creation.
Oh.
That was when she got married to Peter Andre. So that was,
So 2005,
Is that what it was? Yeah. And she paid a fortune for that dress at the time. It was all very fairy princessish.
It had a 7 metre... No, it must be 7 metre train.
Well, it was the full works. She sort of had a tiara and everything as well. But she is fighting off the prospect of bankruptcy, I think. And so she's selling off some things that she knows will sell. And she's going to do it on Instagram, apparently, and she's going to sell her wedding dress. And I just think for most people, that's a pretty extraordinary thing to do, because your wedding dress is something of great sentiment, I suppose, that maybe not when you're divorced, I don't know. But anyway, she's going to sell it. Would you ever sell your wedding dress? Where is your wedding dress? Do you know?
I wouldn't sell my wedding suit.
No, because it's got...
Yeah. I'd like to wear it again.
Sentimental value.
I don't know when I could ever wear it again. That's the thing. Because it was like a frock coat.
Yes. To some posh do, you could.
Maybe wear it to a posh do.
This is something I know in America that women who've had the full bridal dress feel very strongly about it. And apparently it's a bit of a tradition amongst some people in America to get out the wedding dress every anniversary and wear it. And so there's a matter of pride that you can still wear, you can still fit into your wedding dress.
That's ridiculous, because there's got to be 1 year where it's just all safety pins. My mum still got hers.
So there you go.
56 years on.
It's in a cupboard somewhere, I presume.
It's in a box in the attic.
Yes.
And it keeps getting brought out every now
so
and
often.
then.
Exactly.
Just have a look at.
It's always sentimental value attached to your wedding dress. And usually you spent a fortune on it, as Katie Price certainly did.
20 grand it cost her.
Would you ever sell it? I would love to hear from you. GBviews at gbnews.com.
Yes. Now, our main news this morning, though, Nigel Adams. You may not have heard of him before.
But we have now.
Now he's become the third Tory MP to resign in just 24 hours following Boris Johnson's resignation.
The Labour deputy leader, Angela Rayner, called Boris Johnson a coward, saying that he should accept the responsibility for his own actions.
So, what does this mean for Boris Johnson, for the party, actually, more importantly? Now, let's talk to former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, who's here. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, so what... I mean, is this an unbridled attack on Rishi Sunak, basically?
Well, look, I think it's clearly that there's been a breakdown in the relationship between Rishi Sunak and the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. You know, Boris clearly wasn't in control of events anymore. The narrative has been lost. You know, he's still attached to what was Partygate, the Privileges Committee, and it's all got a bit much for him. And he said, you know, right, that's it. He's trying to take back control, a phrase that he campaigned very much for in 2016. He's now trying to take back control of the narrative by pointing the finger at everybody else, and whilst leaving the door open to a comeback by saying he's leaving Parliament for now. Now, whether he will be able to come back because of the way in which the relationship seems to have taken a turn between the current Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister, who's to say?
Well, I mean, if you look at the front page of the Express there, I mean, his actions, they're saying, may lead to electoral slaughter. So it's not... I mean, actually, he might have done it in a fit of pique, that resignation statement and everything. But what he's effectively done is he's not improving his chances of ever getting back in because the Tories may well lose because of his actions. And so is it anything more than an act of just anger and pique?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a phrase in politics that divided parties don't win elections. And when this story sort of came out, and obviously you've seen the resignation of Nadine Dorries and Nigel Adams, as you were just saying, two great supporters of Boris Johnson, they're his two chief champions, basically. My heart really sort of goes out to, you know, people that worked at CCHQ, people that are volunteers, people that are part of the Conservative Party that campaigned you know, openly, honestly, for the good of the country, for the good of the party in 2015, in 2017, in 2019. And, you know, the next general election is only a year or so to go. And what should have been a great celebration in 2019 with an 80-seat majority, with a party that had seemed to come together on the back of Brexit. Whatever your views, the party was sort of committed to levelling up the country, uniting and levelling up. That was the phrase in 2019. It is now totally divided again. And I think former party leader Lord Howard, I think he's in the Times this morning, saying the Sunday Times is saying that now is the time that, you know, if the psychodrama has now passed, if Boris has left the stage, we must all unite behind Rishi Sunak. We must come together as a party, otherwise we're not going to win. Divided parties just don't win elections.
So, in that sense, is this potentially a good thing then for the part? I mean, if you're a Boris fan, no, but if you're just thinking on the basis of the party, in the sense that this psychodrama is happening now and not in 12 months' time?
I think so. I mean, the question there is it too late? You know, has it been too impactful on the back of, you know, the infighting that we saw last year between, you know, Liz Truss's camp and obviously those that didn't support her versus those that did? We're now seeing, you know, divisions between, you know, people that still support Boris Johnson.
And 3 difficult by-elections.
And 3 very difficult by-elections, you know, and even with the 24,000 majority I think Nadine has in mid-Bedfordshire, you know, anything can happen, as we saw in North Shropshire. So when politics and when people are so put off by, you know, the psychodrama, the shenanigans that's going on in the Westminster bubble, people do tend not to lend your support to the party. It's got a lot of work to do.
Well, I wonder then if that lends a bit of weight to what the Labour Party is saying. And look, obviously it's an open goal for them. They're going to milk it for everything they can, as any party would. But they've also come out and said, you know, this is what people care about is cost of living, etc., etc., etc. They've got a point there, actually, haven't they? We've got all this focus on the Westminster bubble, and it's not real life for most of us.
I think that's right, because, yes, you can get sucked into the drama and the gossip and the front pages, and this is, you know, another Boris sort of, you know, whirlwind of events that are taking place. But actually, you know, we've heard this all before. Boris has been in the limelight before. If this is all about Boris, people might just be happy to sort of turn the front page and read about actual news that's affecting them in their day-to-day lives. But on the back of all the psychodrama, if it is the case that actually things like, you're absolutely right to identify, Stephen, if the cost of living improves, if the economy takes a turn for the better, if it is the priorities that the government has identified, like stopping the small boats, like cutting the waiting lists in the NHS, if we start to see those things improve and the government actually starts to deliver, then Rishi Sunak might have a very, very good chance to say, look, forget all the drama, forget the Westminster bubble of events, look at what we've done, look at what we've been able to achieve, and, you know, do you want to put all of that at risk under my leadership, where I do have a united party, or more of a united party, versus a Labour Party where people still don't understand or really know who Sir Keir Starmer is, having had 3 or 4 years in the job as leader of the opposition.
Has Rishi Sunak got what it takes to keep the party, to keep the ship going ahead through what's going to be a very difficult summer or autumn of by-elections he may lose, which would be humiliating and terrible? Has he got what it takes to actually keep the ship going in the right direction?
I think he does.
You wonder what the job... I mean, what a terrible job he's now been landed with.
I think so. And, you know, these by-elections aren't welcome. You know, nobody wants to see in the run-up to an election, where anything can happen in a by-election, it's safe to say, but in the run-up to an election where you want sort of a general election, where you want that momentum to be behind you, where you want to make sure that your party is as united as it possibly can be, these by-elections have been caused by splits within the Conservative Party, so that's how they've come about. But the party, funny enough, I say when these things happen, it does tend to come together. And there'll be many, many people that are going to those constituencies that are fighting in those by-elections, activists, councillors, members, that will want to make the point to local constituents that, look, we've got a by-election. We know that that's taking place because of what's happened in Westminster and broken down relationships. But this is what really matters to people. So it's in whether it's mid-Bedfordshire, whether it's in Selby, or anywhere else in Uxbridge and South Wessex. Then it is about the cost of living. It is about the economy. It is about your local hospitals. And this is what the Conservatives are doing to support you.
You see, this isn't good for politicians as a whole, though, is it? Because what it seems... Look, maybe it's just me, and like you, we know a lot of politicians. We've got to know them over the years. But the picture this paints to me is not of politicians who care about their constituents, but it's politicians who, if they're not getting their own way, they're throwing the toys out the pram. And that can apply to any party, any politician. You sort of think... It doesn't give the impression that the right people are actually looking after our interests somehow.
I think that's right, actually. I think there's been certainly a shift in the tone of how politics has been done. I think 2016 was clearly very divisive, and there were those two very dividing lines, whether you're pro-EU or whether you wanted to vote leave. And of course, there was divisions about how you should leave the EU and to what extent. And there will be people out there, and who will say that Brexit hasn't still been done. So there is a whole debate around Brexit, which was very, very toxic in terms of our society. And then I think when you get to 2019, where you have a number of MPs elected for the first time in constituencies where people had never voted Conservative before, there's obviously this drive and this urgency to make sure that actually those constituencies are being delivered for. And that's against the backdrop of the pandemic, where you have a number of MPs who were basically shut out from Westminster, who were newly elected, that didn't have the normal contact that you would as a new MP, that didn't quite know what was going on, but were having their letter boxes and their letter bags filled with post and filled with letters and emails of anguish about COVID and what the government's doing. And that puts pressure on that MP, new as they are, to want to make sure that it's getting all that it wants to for its constituents without necessarily going through what would have been the traditional processes of being able to take a bit of time, formulate a policy, lobby a minister. It now needs to be urgent 24 hours a day. And if you don't get what you want, as you absolutely say, then people have a tendency to sort of think, well, what can I do to create headlines? What can I do to make sure that will force the government's hand? And that can be not voting with the government, that can be defying a whip, that can be... And that causes tensions within political parties, and that's what causes sometimes these breakdowns.
OK. Charlie, I know we're going to catch up with you a little bit later on, but for now, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I suppose Rishi Sunak could also go into the next election saying all of that nastiness, all of the by-elections, whatever happened, it's Boris's fault and he's gone.
Yeah.
So it could draw a line under it, I suppose, couldn't he?
Might do.
He's got the personality to project that, I wonder.
It might help, but honestly, you do wonder where it's all going, don't you? Anyway, let's just remind you of the top stories this morning at 13 minutes past 6. In the wake of all of this, and perhaps this comes as no surprise, the Prime Minister is being urged to call a snap general election after those 3 resignations. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Prime Minister must finally find a backbone and send the country to the polls. I have to say 3 immediate resignations within 24 hours.
By-elections. Now, Manchester City fans continue to celebrate this morning after lifting the Champions League trophy for the first time. These were the scenes in Manchester last night as Rodri put City in front in the second half, and they held on for the win against Inter Milan, and they're now only the second English team to ever complete that historic treble.
And more thunderstorms and temperatures of up to 32 degrees forecast today after the hottest day of the year so far. There's a yellow weather warning for thunder until 9 o'clock tonight for Wales, Northern Ireland and most of Western and Central England. The Met Office says most of the UK will meet heat wave criteria next week. I had severe weather warnings yesterday where I live.
Yeah.
South Mids.
Did
similar to
anything
you.
severe happen?
No. I mean, the weather was lovely,
hot.
but all this terrible thunderstorms, all the rest of it, not a sniff.
Touch wood.
Oh, well,
No.
could have
Careful
done
what
with a bit
you...
of rain to clear it all.
Don't wish for that, not yet.
And what's going on in this studio today? Honestly, it's so hot in here.
It's lovely.
You...
It's really nice. Do you know,
melting.
there is. I've had this debate with so many male colleagues in the past, and with my sons and everything. There is a difference between the way men and women perceive heat in the room. The men always want it to be cold. They always want to open a window or open a door or something, and I want it to be nice and warm. We definitely have temperature differences, don't we?
Oh, well, now that's one for you then. That's a good point. Is there a fight in your family over the temperature?
I'll bet there
If
is.
there's men want it cooler, and it's too hot in here for me. GBnews at GBviews at gbnews.com.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you as well. If you're a City fan, I mean, how do you feel? What was it like? Manchester City, they won the first ever Champions League and the treble after a 1-0 win over Inter Milan last night in Istanbul.
Yeah, Rodri scored the only goal, capping an unforgettable season for Pep Guardiola's side.
Well, Aidan McGee must have had a wonderful night last night watching it in the cinema, weren't you?
I did watch it in the cinema, yeah. It was a different experience, I have to say. I tried to do it last year when Liverpool played Real Madrid, but the feed stopped, and so I had to dash back home to catch the game. But, yeah, we paid for recliner seats last night.
Oh, very nice.
I think we got some pictures, I think, of myself and my nephew, James, in the seats. I even took my shoes off as well. And really made a night of it. Yeah, and I made sure for the benefit of the photo as well. There was a nice picture of the water there. I didn't knock the actual pint that I actually had.
Oh, right, yeah.
But
there you go.
There we are. There for the benefit of our radio listeners. That's James and I just in front of the screen. There we are.
Oh, and you're reclining, lazy boy chairs.
You just see you can't see my feet in that picture, unfortunately. That's my nephew James to the right, and it was just something different. I mean, it was probably about 2/3 full, I would say. Don't forget, City don't draw the sort of crowds that, say, United or Liverpool or Arsenal or Chelsea would necessarily draw, but it was, I think it was like 12 quid or something like that.
Oh, I think that's really good to watch on a big screen.
It was decent atmosphere. And what was interesting was that when you watch it, because it's loud and it's, you know, there's commentary and everything, you can actually talk at a normal level that you wouldn't normally be able to do if you were watching the latest blockbuster or whatever, you know. So that was good like that. And as for the game, it wasn't a classic. But then finals don't tend to be. When Man United won the treble in 1999, it was an awful game. When Chelsea played Man City 2 years ago, it wasn't a particularly decent game. Finals tend to be so tense and so much riding on it that you don't.
So the first half went with no goals, obviously.
No goals, no. But the City lost Kevin De Bruyne, one of their main players, to injury. Yeah,
most fans would have felt a bit low at that point.
Absolutely. I mean, he's one of those guys who, if you take the jewels away, if you take the jewel away, the rest of the crown doesn't look quite as good. But they rode through. It was okay. But we had a deal. I've always had a deal with Stephen where if I come out with a prediction, we forget about it unless I get one right. And I did say on Friday that it was going to be a very, very tight. It wasn't going to be a match. It wasn't going to be. It wasn't going to be the read-through.
You said 2-1.
I did say 2-1. Yeah, okay. Let's not focus on the numbers necessarily. But I didn't think it was going to be easy, and I think Inter overall probably the better side on the night. I mean, they certainly had better chances. And City rode their luck a little bit, but you have to ride your luck in these finals sometimes. So City have been imperious near enough all the way through. It was inevitable that someone was going to do a number on them tactically in the final. Inter had some excellent chances as well. Their chairman, Sheikh Mansour, he bought the club in 2008. Last night was his only second match he's ever attended.
Why would you buy a football club and then not go to their matches?
Well, I was told at the time, because I was covering them in 2008 when they got taken over. In fact, the next partner of mine was actually at a family event, and she received a call. She was worried about her job because City was skint, and they're owned by the disgraced former Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. And she got a call saying, "Oh, your job's been saved." She got a call from someone from Bloomberg, and they thought they'd see this bloke all the time. But he never turned up to a game until 2010, I think it was. But it didn't matter. She saved her job, and exactly.
And so, what does this mean for legacy?
Legacy is really important here because they didn't have enough of an international profile with having just won domestic trophies. They hadn't won a European trophy, I think, since the 60s, I think it was. So, but they need to win the Champions League. I mentioned yesterday I was in New York in 2010. Nobody knew who they were. They were just in the shadow of Manchester United all the time. Now they haven't just won the Champions League, they've won the treble, which was always allowed United to stand out head and shoulders above Liverpool and Arsenal, their main competitors in the domestically. Inter could have won a treble last night as well, don't forget, you know, so they denied.
Oh, gosh, they were up for a treble.
They were up for a treble as well. They won the domestic league and domestic cups. It's a huge thing for them as well. And so it does mean a lot for legacy. I mean, listen, it's not going to make them entice a better player to City because they've got the money to do that already, but it just helps with a bit of prestige. Pep Guardiola said last night it's a huge relief to win this trophy. He also thanked the owners of the club. He's been there since 2016 and they've underachieved in Europe in his time there despite reaching a final 2 years ago. And he said, look, other clubs might have sacked me, They might have said, look, come on, we need a change here. He's been here since 2016. He still hasn't given us the Champions League, which we were craving. And they stuck by him, and he thanked them for that. And he also said, look, we've won one. Come on, let's see if we can do another one next year, another one after that. Let's be like the real sides. I mean, Liverpool have won 6, for example. Man United have won 3. Chelsea have won 2. Nottingham Forest have won 2. So they want to be one of those sides who win it multiple times. And who knows? I always remember when you see it in tennis sometimes, don't you? When a player wins his first or their first Grand Slam and quickly follows another and another and another. It didn't happen with Emma Raducanu, of course, but it's happened with other players in the past. Sometimes that psychological hurdle, the first one, is the most important to overcome. But overall, last night they were suffocated all over the pitch. They really were. They were given a real going over by Inter Milan, who Guardiola was quick to praise afterwards. He said they really gave us something last night. And as I said in the week leading up to it, the Italian clubs do not make it easy for you. Last night was no exception. Romelu Lukaku is known to a British audience. He came on in the second half. He missed a couple of massive chances, but he did look more of a threat when they came on. They were getting more into the City box back there. And I hadn't seen City really give an examination like that. And maybe it's a lesson to domestic clubs here. That's how you play against Manchester City. That's how you rattle them. We must mention as well the problems before the game, but nothing on the scale of last year, but there were access problems. 20,000 Manchester City fans there. Cab drivers charging 15 times what they would normally charge to go a short journey. Traffic is a nightmare in Istanbul. I went there in 2008 with Arsenal. I could see the stadium at Fenerbahce that I was going to out my hotel window, and the bloke in reception said, you should leave 4 hours before the game. And I said, are you having a laugh? Anyway, I ignored him, got there 45 minutes late. Luckily, nothing happened in the first half. It was only 4-0 to Arsenal.
No. Oh, well, there you go.
I suppose if you've paid 15 times the normal taxi fare, at least it was worth it. I know,
exactly. City having a parade on in Manchester 6:30 tomorrow as well, so they're not doing
that'll be something.
Yeah, it will. Really well, West Ham were criticised last week for doing it too quickly. It didn't allow their fans to get back from Prague, so the extra 24 hours will allow City fans to get back.
And am I right? Is the only other English club to have won the treble is Manchester United?
They did, yeah, but they did it in kind of similar circumstances, and they were given a real tough examination that night by a high-class Bayern Munich side. They got their tactics wrong. And it was a bit of luck in the last sort of 4 or 5 minutes that saw them over the line. No, it doesn't.
It's take the trophies back home to Manchester. My goodness.
Only anoraks like me remember how it was won. Most people just remember the trophy being held in hand. That's all that matters now. City have done it, and now I think they'll do it again as well next year and the year after.
I just think it must be wonderful for the fans. If you're somebody who's followed that club all your life, always felt a bit of an underdog up against United, and suddenly, you know, you've got
just quickly, the week United won the treble, I was at Wembley watching Manchester City in a playoff final against Gillingham in the 3rd tier of English football.
Ooh, that's
and City got through that day. It was a pivotal moment in their history on penalties, and I could not imagine. They were so far away from Manchester United, it wasn't even possible. And even winning that playoff final was like a blot on the landscape compared to what United had achieved a couple of nights beforehand. So that was only 24 years ago. You know, there were fans in there last night who would have been at that game. I remember City really suffering in the 3rd tier. So let's hope they've enjoyed it overnight and continue to enjoy it this week because the parade's tomorrow, of course.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Aidan, thanks very much indeed.
Well, let us know anyway. We'd love to hear your views if you're a City fan or a United fan. Well, sometimes there are families that have a bit of both, aren't there? Yeah. Goodness knows what the feeling is like in your living room last night. Anyway, do get in touch and tell us what it was all like. GBViews at gbnews.com.
We've got more to come, including is the former US president facing trumped-up charges. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
6:25. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Morning to you. Yeah. Especially morning if you're watching us in bed this morning.
Oh, that must be so nice.
Wouldn't it? Well, mind, you're still up early for a Sunday. Wedding dresses, because Katie Price is selling her pink one.
Yeah.
How many has she had, though?
I don't know.
Quite a few.
But this was the one that she wore when she got married to Peter Andre back in 2005-ish or something.
Yeah.
It was an enormous pink, fluffy, a huge meringue of a dress, except it was a pink meringue. There she is. That's her picture on Instagram because she is selling. She's going to use Instagram to sell it. I'll bet you that she's got lots of fans who would probably really love it.
Oh, but
I wonder how much she'll get for it. How much did she pay for it?
20 grand, apparently. All those years ago.
It's a big designer number, but...
it is a big designer number, but, I mean, it's blooming awful, isn't it?
Well, I know.
Anyway, maybe she hated it on the day. I don't know, because June has been in touch. Says, I really hated my wedding dress on the day, but I still have it in storage. Every now and again, I get it out to have a reminisce over it, and I love it more and more every time. It's not about the dress, but about the day it reminds me of. 29 years later, still going strong.
It's funny that you hated your wedding dress on the day. I can understand you wearing it on the day and then maybe a couple of years later thinking, why did I wear that thing? But why would you... We hate it on the day, that's sad. Alan's got in touch. Morning, Alan. He said, my wife died years ago, but I keep a hold of her wedding dress. Our daughter had it tailored and wore it for her own wedding last year. It was a beautiful day, and it was nice to share it with her memory. I think that's
nice.
Lovely. Yeah.
I do think that's really nice. The difference with all this, of course, Katie Price is divorced and has been remarried and all this stuff. Maybe it just doesn't have sentimental value in the same way.
Well, she's trying to ward off bankruptcy.
Well, there is that as
She's selling off a lot of her stuff, apparently.
Don't understand.
I just thought maybe a wedding dress is just, that's a line you don't cross. There's something special about a wedding dress, isn't there?
Well, I'd think so. Well, but again, maybe not if you're divorced. I don't know. No. Maybe you would just want rid.
Yeah. Certainly take up a lot of space in your cupboard, wouldn't it?
That would.
That one would, yeah.
Lummy neck.
You can't exactly roll that up and stuff it in a carrier bag, can you?
No, might need a bit of ironing. Anyway, let's know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.com. Now, let's take you to the other side of the pond, should we? Because Donald Trump has called the federal indictment against him ridiculous and baseless in his first public appearances since the charges were announced.
Yeah, but it is a serious charge, isn't it? There are 37 counts of this indictment, and they accuse the former US president of keeping sensitive documents at his Mar-a-Lago property.
Yes, Mr. Trump also said the charges amounted to election interference. But will any of this actually affect his chances of becoming president once again?
So let's go over to Nashville, Tennessee now to talk to the US political commentator, Scotty Nell Hughes. A very good morning to you. My goodness, what a lot of drama is going on both sides of the pond. I mean, do you think Donald Trump will be seriously worried by any of this? Because some of the commentators are even talking about the possibility of him doing jail time.
You know, it's interesting. Good morning to you both as well. That you bring up that there's drama on both sides of the pond. I think it's very telling that we're talking about two leaders, former leaders of the countries. They're the ones causing all the drama at this stage. That's what's occupying the news headlines. But in Donald Trump's case, you know, even before Trump was leaving office, the hyenas were already circling. They were already trying to figure out how they were going to keep Donald Trump from running for office again. And many of those rumors would involve a prosecution, the DOJ, the FBI, into some sort of way that they could legally keep him from running again in 2024. I think this is why Trump knew he had to declassify these documents while he was in office, because that was going to be the best chance when he knew these sorts of attacks, these sorts of another witch hunt came after him, that he was going to have the best chance of proving his innocence, and that all of this is really just a bunch of unfortunate targeting that continues to happen to both not only his personal life, but also his business and now his political future.
But the experts say these documents aren't declassified and that he didn't have the power to declassify them. And they also say, actually, this is very difficult to defend against because it's not just comment, hearsay, speculation. They've got it's photographic evidence of boxes and boxes of top-secret documents stored in the house, stored in the bathroom, stored in the shower stall.
Because if I was the president of the United States and I was going to take major top secret documents, I would put them right under the eyes of the Secret Service and put them in a bathroom or in a hallway or in a bedroom. Or as we found out, the FBI went through the former First Lady's underwear drawer. That's exactly where anybody would store their national secrets and top documents. I mean, I think what the ironic in all this, experts can say this, but when it comes down to the law, and the president does have the right to declassify documents. And I find it funny that all of a sudden the DOJ is making an issue out of this, and yet we know and have confirmed that there were documents in Vice President Mike Pence's house's control. There was documents under Joe Biden when he was vice president. There was even and the vice president does not have the right to declassify documents like a president does. And we can go over Obama and Clinton. All of these people have found documents, and yet it is Donald Trump that is magically, when he is running for office, being the one to be held accountable for items that under surveillance 24/7 when he left office, those are the ones that they're going to actually say were illegal to take out of the White House.
What I don't understand, and I don't know if you can explain, is why would any president or vice president take home top secret documents, boxes and boxes of them? Why would they do that?
Well, let's figure out what's in these documents at first. I mean, that is one key part in all of this that I think Donald Trump knew, that now that they've come after, which he probably figured out they were going to try to do in some form, all of these documents are now going to have to be put into court, put on the record. For once, we might actually have transparency in the United States government. I mean, unfortunately, sadly, in America, in our history, we are finding out the truth about what really happens in situations after the damage has already been done. Or people are not caring anymore. And this happened time and time again under while Trump was running for office and while he was in office. I mean, this latest 2 weeks, we have found out that there was absolutely zero evidence for the FBI to tie the Trump campaign to Russia. And yet that's all we heard about even before Donald Trump was sworn in. And now we're finding that was all one made up, as Donald Trump put it, witch hunt to try to find something. So once again, I think Donald Trump knew that this was going to be the goal, the target, and he needed these documents to prove his innocence, and his only chance of actually getting to them was going to be making sure that he declassified him when he had the chance, and he had them underneath his care rather than risk them possibly never coming to the surface again. Sort of like all those files that we saw on Hillary Clinton's server that just happened to be, bleach bit. Before the FBI found it.
Yeah, but that's a key point, isn't it? I mean, I don't understand why he's not blocked himself into a corner. He spent his entire campaign in the run-up to 2016 getting everyone in his crowds to chant, "Lock her up, lock her up." Well, he doesn't want to be locked up, and he's done something at least as bad, hasn't he?
Absolutely not. There's a difference. She was Secretary of State, and she stored these on a private server. We have no idea what Hillary Clinton had on hers. And like I said, she wasn't president. There is a law that says that presidents can declassify documents. And that's
hold on.
Acting under.
Hold on. I've been looking into this because it's, according to one court case, and this was a federal appeals court in 2020, declassification cannot occur unless designated officials follow specified procedures. That's according to a federal court. And Donald Trump said, well, I can declassify stuff just by saying it or even thinking it. Well, that's not right.
Not necessarily thinking of it. Once again, do you think Donald Trump carried out all of these boxes by himself, or he carried them out at midnight? That would be absolutely absurd to consider. There was definitely other people around in the White House, other attorneys, other members of the police force, of law enforcement. Like I said, Secret Service, FBI, all sorts of people around who saw these documents being removed from the White House. And you mean to tell me that not one of them thought, hey, let me make it a point that he can't do this? And yet we haven't heard about this until after the FBI showed up with a SWAT team to go through Melania's panty drawer. I mean, come on, guys. We can see what this is. There's a reason why Donald Trump is upset about this. And he knew his innocence was going to have to be proven because they were going to call him guilty.
I wonder if we'll ever get to the transparency you just said would be so welcome, to actually know why he had the documents, whether they were declassified, what they say or not. I doubt we'll ever know. Isn't that true? It comes down to what you believe.
Well, that would be wonderful. I think the American people, I think everybody would love to see that. The only thing that transparency hurts are those usually that are in office themselves, as you're learning right now, dealing with the drama around Boris Johnson and his administration, as well as Parliament. Transparency is very, very important. That's one thing that the right and the left can't agree on. Unfortunately, the people who don't like it are the ones that usually have most of the power and can prevent it from happening.
Scotty Nell Hughes, good to see you. Thanks very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But it boils down to who you believe.
But it does the same with Boris Johnson. There are people who will not believe the worst of Boris Johnson, and there are others who will never, ever believe that there's anything good about him at all. And it just seems that people's opinions on these very colourful characters are so divided that it doesn't matter what proof you lay in front of them, they won't accept it. Because they'll always find a reason to reject it.
This is what I don't understand about the way politics is going at the moment, is that they're almost like religions or cults.
Well, these two characters are a bit like that, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the people who... I mean, you see it more in the States with Donald Trump, but certainly over
Boris
here as
has
well.
the same sort of cult status.
Which is just... You know, say people will not hear anything against them. It's all... I mean, the fact it's a witch hunt, therefore it's a witch hunt. Is it... I mean, either side of the pond, is it actually a witch hunt, or are people being investigated because they've done something wrong? I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer to it. But I like to be a bit more analytical than that, personally. So I think, well, I don't know. It's just...
I mean, that argument about, you know, that they weren't declassified, were they or were they not declassified? And the reason he took them home is because he was worried that there was going to be a witch hunt. And I've not heard that argument before, but that's an interesting one, isn't it?
But that doesn't... There's also... I mean, it was reported in the States that... There's apparently a tape recording of Trump saying these documents were not declassified. The court ruling saying, well, actually, you can't declassify them without there being a chain of processes. And yet, obviously, there are plenty of people like Scotty Nell Hughes saying, well, no, they weren't just declassified.
Well, that's what I mean. It comes down to what you believe about these particular characters. Gosh, will we ever really know? Or are we just pawns being played somewhere?
Well, I think we probably are.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've got a view, GBViews at GBNews.com.
Yeah, in fact, we'll look through some of your news in a couple of moments. We'll mainly be looking for all the Sunday papers as Boris and Rishi go head-to-head. This is Breakfast on GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
20 to 7. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yeah. Lots of people with lots of lovely views about wedding dresses and whether you should sell them. Sue in Cheshire says, I got married in July 73 and I still have my wedding dress, despite being divorced in 1981. It is hanging in a wardrobe in my sewing room. I also still have my veil, tiara, top tier of my wedding cake and the little church that was on the top.
That's quite a lot to keep. Yeah.
You're a sentimentalist, aren't you?
It's quite a lot to keep, Sue, after you got divorced.
Yeah, but she obviously loved
the wedding cake and all that. You can
still look back and think that was a lovely day, can't you?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been divorced. I don't know. I like this one from Jane. Having eventually left an abusive marriage about 4 years ago, I took mine to the tip. I launched it into the skip, didn't give it a backward glance. It was totally liberating.
I'll bet it was liberating and you deserved it.
Good on you.
Yeah. But I think even if you've got divorced, unless it was a seriously horrible thing, you eventually can look back on that day and think that was a lovely, happy day.
Yeah, I hope so. Eliza gave her wedding dress to the local amateur dramatic society after my divorce, and they cut it up to use the silk.
Yeah. Sadly, that happened to my mum's wedding dress.
Did it?
She gave it to my daughter to she put it in the dressing up box, actually, and my sister chopped it up. So it had many sort of wearings in different styles.
Right.
After that, but that's beautiful, beautiful silk.
You see, and Cheryl said, I didn't sell my wedding dress, but I donated it to St Oswald's Hospice charity for them to sell, as they were short of funds during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now that
is a great idea.
That's a good idea, because then it's being sort of altruistic.
Well, some charities have special wedding dress, departments. Where second-hand wedding dresses are, and that's often a very cheap way to buy a really first-class dress. It's only been worn once before. Why not?
Yeah. Anyway, your thoughts, please. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Right, shall we have a look at today's front pages? The Telegraph leading with the Tory civil war, as they call it, as Boris Johnson hits out at Rishi Sunak after failing to back him over Partygate.
The Sunday Express says electoral slaughter is on the cards, as there are concerns, apparently, that more Tory MPs will quit over this civil war.
Yeah, 3 so far, well, including Boris. In the Mirror, Keir Starmer says general election now, as he says Sunak has lost control of the government.
And The Sun on Sunday has England and Man United star Marcus Rashford splitting from his fiancée.
That's a shame, isn't it, to splash somebody's private romance ending. A young person as well, all over the front page of a newspaper.
Yeah.
I thought we were better than that nowadays. Maybe not.
No. Sadly not. Let's see what Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe make of it all. Morning, you
Good
two.
morning.
Nice
Good
to
morning.
see you.
Lovely to see you.
Fraser, let's have a look at the Mail on Sunday, should we? It's war, they say.
Yeah, the duel for the soul of the Tories. This is due to the ongoing fallout of Boris Johnson's resignation. I mean, it's been, only been a few months since the last Tory meltdown. We're overdue a big spat. What essentially is being said is that there will be a civil war, or Rishi Sunak will trigger a civil war if he doesn't allow Boris Johnson to crawl back into the Commons, if he's not allowed to be given a safe seat in order to stage his comeback. Now, it seems a bit that this civil war is overstated, because it's not as if Boris has tons of backers. Many more MPs were expected to resign along with him in protest, and they haven't. Many of the staunchest Boris loyalists have said, no, we're staying. Some of them have said we're staying to fight the blob, but others, clearly want to keep their
blob
seats.
business that everyone keeps going on
come
about.
from?
It's emerged from nowhere.
It was a coinage of Dominic Cummings, I think, when he was working in the education department with Michael Gove, and they talked about the blob that was preventing reform. So it sort of referred to this kind of civil service intransigence, the Westminster-style civil service that won't let anything happen. But, we should remember that Boris has resigned mainly because he expects that he probably wouldn't survive a vote after the Privileges Committee. He was essentially told that the Tories were not going to be whipped to save him, and he thinks that they would, vote in favour of this report, which would then trigger a by-election, and he probably wouldn't win the by-election either. So we do have to take his claims with a little bit of a pinch of salt. He is trying to avoid the judgment of Tory MPs, avoid the judgment of the electorate. So for him to say, that he's being cheated is a little bit rich. Although I think there are problems with this kind of report.
And it's not even clear that we don't know that Boris actually wants to be re-elected or reselected anywhere else. We know that he's trousered a lot of cash in the last few months, in the region of millions. We know that he's bought a very, very expensive house, in the vicinity of Oxfordshire and somewhere near Henley, possibly. But I think that he's a man that doesn't like to be told he's in the wrong. He's angry. We see that from his statement. He's angry. He feels that he's been told off. And as you say, he doesn't want to sort of be thrown out. So he's decided to walk before he's pushed and, raise his fingers at the government as he goes. So there's lots of speculation here.
Well, it has caused a fuss, but is it really a civil war yet?
Well, I think there are... I mean, I'm sure Fraser knows more about this, but, it does seem to be something fundamentally, after 13 years of Tory rule, there is something fundamentally broken about the party now. When you compare them, even comparing them to Labour, who do seem, for all their faults, they do seem to be moving in one direction, whereas the Conservative Party, not just for 12 months, for a couple of years now, they've been all over the place. So many factions, so much discontent. It's kind of close to...
So mind you, I'll tell you what really irritates me, though, and it does. I say it's not party political because they all do it when they're in opposition. But the Sunday Mirror has got Keir Starmer demanding a snap general election. Well, it isn't going to happen. He knows it's not going to happen.
But what's he meant to do? Like, he's the leader of the opposition.
It's like, come on.
So he's immediately come out and said this farce must stop. People have had enough of the farce of Tory rule. Let the people have their say on 13 years of Tory failure. He says that the Prime Minister's not strong enough to stand up to his party, that he can't lead his party, which is a bit odd, actually, because it's Boris Johnson who's causing the trouble in the last few days, not Rishi Sunak, who's quietly travelling the world and getting on with his job, or trying to get on with his job. But, this is obviously Keir Starmer's coming out and saying, time for a general election, as if that's going to solve the issue. Imagine that.
That would just be terrible. Weeks. But, there couldn't be one soon anyway, because we've got 3 by-elections that are going to have to be in place.
Exactly.
I don't think they could snap a general election before that, could they?
Yeah, and, if MPs resigning is one thing, he hasn't... If it were ministers resigning or something, then it would be legitimate to say that the government is spiralling out of control. The current government has all kinds of problems. It's tanking in the polls. It's failing to... Rishi is clearly failing to meet on all of his missions or pledges or whatever it is they're calling them. Priorities. Sorry, they've rebranded it. Promises have been rebranded to priorities, which is a sign that, it's not...
that's a bit cynical.
It's a sign that things are not happening. So there are all those kinds of problems, but the idea that they've lost control in a fundamental way, that there's this, split within the actual government, is wrong. There is a broader political split in the Tory party, which I think is significant. We have moved from a kind of more populist era under Boris, and, that is actually the direction of the party that millions of people voted for. And we've ended up with something very different, with Rishi Sunak as a much more kind of technocratic figure. I do think that is a problem, but clearly, Boris is not the man to... rediscover the soul of the Tory party, because he is such a tainted figure.
Graham's been in touch, says, totally fed up with hearing about Boris. The Tories will probably lose the by-elections because ruling parties tend to. Let's get it out the way now. Rishi will still have a majority. Well, he will.
Yes, he will. And it's up to him as to whether he can make enough of that to at least sustain power.
And Boris has been going around saying, they're all in Parliament because of me, saying it's his majority, not Rishi's majority, and it's been squandered. Which is again, it's true to a certain extent. I think, two things can be true at once, which is that Boris did do everything that he was accused of, and we've seen all the pictures of Partygate, and that there's no wriggling out of that. But also there was a kind of a desire, let's say, among the sort of establishment, in Parliament, even many Tory MPs didn't really like him that much, to get rid of him, whether that's to exact revenge on Brexit, whether that's because they don't like his style of politics. For whatever reason. He does also have some legitimate gripes, I think.
Yeah. Let's change tack, just for a quick look at the Sunday Express, Emma. And the temperature, another glorious day.
Yeah. So, I don't know, I want the hot weather, and then yesterday I was cycling through London just thinking, this is unbearable, I can't bear this. It's kind of a difficult one, but everybody's looking very tanned.
Yeah, I know, isn't it great?
It is nice to have a bit of sun, isn't it? So yesterday we topped Ibiza, we rivaled Ibiza and Rhodes, so we're better than all the holiday destinations. It's always a good one when you can say, well, I don't need to be on holiday, it was hotter than, XXX yesterday. Same again today, except, of course, today, it's going to trigger thunderstorms. So everybody needs to be very, very careful. We've seen these warnings from the health and heat health warnings about drinking lots of water, and as though people didn't cope with all this back in the 60s and 70s and 50s and 40s, and, there was hot weather before and people did survive.
Yeah.
And, yes, it's important to look out for older people, and it's important to be aware of pets and things like that, but I think that we can all just get through it by drinking water. We don't need to be sent home from work. Unions are talking about sending people home and all of this.
Let's get on with it.
I mean, we have more air conditioning now in modern offices than there ever used to be, so I think that people can actually cope.
Yes, I think we can. Good point, well made. Fraser, Emma, got to leave it there for now, but thank you very much indeed. See you later on.
Thank you.
Yeah, because now we're going to talk space. The UK's first ever vertical rocket is to be launched from the Shetlands this summer.
Yeah, the spaceport on the island of Unst is almost ready for the big day. However, the company running the site says it's still waiting for a launch licence.
Oh. That seems a big problem.
Which government department handles that, I wonder?
And how quickly will they handle it? Joining us now is space and planetary scientist Andy Lown. Good morning. Hello, Andy.
Good morning, Anne and Steve. How are you doing?
Well, we're doing well, and you know what space nuts we are, and neither of us knew there was a spaceport being built in the Shetlands.
Oh, yes, this is really important on the Isle of Unst. It's quite interesting because it's really at the top of the Shetland Islands, so it's very, very far north. And this place was famous anyway. There was an RAF base there, so it's well known to have facilities there which were closed down. And the guy who's running this is a former RAF man himself, and he's really done everything he can to boost the economy of the area because he's really interested in the area. And they've actually got this facility now under construction. And it's been going on for quite some time, since about 2017. And they had a little bit of a failure with finance, with a dodgy company trying to invest in them, which wasn't really there. But they've had some serious investments for some major players now, with Lockheed Martin involved, the British government heavily involved, and other organisations. A big Danish billionaire has thrown some money at this project. And the idea is to have a vertical launch facility from these islands. And they're starting to actually put things together now. The first launch of first of 3 launch platforms is being constructed at the moment. They put this interesting announcement out that they want the British government to hurry up, and get the licence approved for launching. But if you remember, Virgin did exactly the same thing, sort of to push people a bit. They'll get the launch licence by August, and that's probably the right process. Everything is reasonably good there. There's an environmental issue which has been going on for a period of time, but I think they've agreed not to launch rockets in about a 1-2 month period in order to protect wildlife. But generally speaking, since the site was actually used by the Royal Air Force anyway, and they'll be reopening a landing strip and things like that, I think there's a bit of a nonsense regarding the environmental thing, because it has already been strong facilities there. But this has a great potential for Britain. This is a vertical launching thing, because the satellites launched from here will be absolutely perfect for polar orbit, that's north to south, going up and down, if you like, and sun synchronous orbits, which means as the spacecraft, the satellite orbits the Earth, it stays on the sun side of it. So the Earth essentially rotates underneath you as you go around. That's perfect for Earth observations, where all the best spy satellites, for instance, go in these polar orbits, because you can keep an eye on what everything that's going on underneath you. And that's absolutely ideal, especially in Scotland, where you've actually got CubeSat, which is a small satellite about the size of a couple of loaves of bread. And these small satellites are being built in Scotland on a regular basis. So to have its own launch facility as well would be a really big boon. And there's a lot of companies lined up for this one, actually, to help launch the facilities.
What sort
facilities, which is really quite important.
Andy, what sort of rockets are we looking at here? Because, I mean, that launch platform doesn't look like it's not like you see it at Cape Canaveral.
Well, of course, yes, they're going to be relatively small rockets because you're getting relatively small payloads under 2,000 kilos into polar orbit, so they don't need to be huge. Some of the rockets which are coming in here now is the Pathfinder, which is going to be a great deal of it is being used, I think, by 3D printing, one of these great 3D printing programs, which is working. It's already been tested in America. A different company has tested this, and it works perfectly well. So, yes, you're not going to be seeing Saturn Vs or anything like Falcon 9s being launched from here. But that's not the design of the facility. The facility is to launch other rockets to take satellite payloads into polar orbit. So you're actually targeting your market, which is really good because this is a market which is really going to expand. Again, it's the kind of thing that Virgin were targeting, if you like, the smaller end of the satellite launch facilities. They're never going to launch a geostationary satellite from this position, but that's not what they're aiming for anyway.
Brilliant.
And there's a number of companies, in fact, even suborbital rockets being launched, test launches from there, which could happen at the end of this year.
Oh, well, there's a lot to look forward to. Andy, thank you for shedding some light on it all. Thanks very much indeed.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll keep watching. We will. More to come, including a historic night, of course, in Istanbul, as Manchester City secured the treble after defeating Inter Milan in the Champions League final.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hot and humid is the name of the game throughout Sunday for many of us as we import this rather hot air all the way from southern areas of Europe. There are occluded fronts around, so we are going to see some showers and outbreaks of rain throughout the day as well. Initially across parts of Scotland, and those will be pushing northwards as we head throughout the morning. Elsewhere, it's a generally drier and brighter start with a good amount of sunny intervals, but that sunshine is strong enough to start developing showers, and as we head into the afternoon we could see some particularly heavy ones and thundery ones in the picture. So for parts of western Scotland down into northwest England, Wales and parts of central England as well, we do have a yellow thunderstorm warning out for some heavy downbursts. The temperatures will be climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius once again today across southeastern areas of England. Combine that with the moisture, is going to be feeling quite humid for many of us. Those showers will take a little bit of the time to eventually die down. Could be still thundery into the evening time, but generally some clear intervals developing overnight, though quite cloudy, misty across some coastal areas. Will be a muggy night for all of us. Temperatures holding up around the mid to high teens, so potentially that it does feel quite uncomfortable for sleeping in places, certainly in those urban areas. Starting off Monday then on a warm theme. Again, we pretty much repeat the situation where we've got some brightness early on, some sunny intervals, but the showers then begin to develop as we head into the afternoon. Like Sunday, they will be hit and miss, so not everyone is going to see them, but where they do occur, you certainly will notice them. There's the risk of hail and strong gusts of winds in association with those as well. Temperatures again climbing towards the mid to high 20s, if not 30 degrees Celsius for some areas once again. As we head towards the middle part of next week, the showers will tend to ease off and we'll see more in the way of drier and sunnier weather for everyone. Temperatures, though, staying in at least the mid to high 20s. Enjoy your day.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 11th of June. Today, another one bites the dust. A third Tory MP has resigned, throwing the party into chaos. Can Rishi Sunak survive another attack from his own side? Manchester City have won their first ever Champions League and the treble after a 1-0 win over Inter Milan last night.
And Donald Trump has branded the federal indictment against him as ridiculous and baseless. But will it stop him from running for the next US president? And Katie Price is selling her wedding dress, the one she wore to marry Peter Andre during their fairy tale wedding in 2005. We're asking this morning, are you keeping yours?
Good morning. I'm Stephen Diggs.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
It's interesting. I'm surprised how many people do actually sell their wedding dresses.
Yeah, look, quite a lot, actually, in various ways. In fact, Miranda says, I was thinking about hosting a party where all the girls come in their wedding dresses. And I tried it out on some of my girlfriends the other day, and there was 100% enthusiasm. Well, if you're going to spend a lot of money and you feel you looked really brilliant in your wedding dress, why would you only wear it once?
This is the thing. It's a lot of money to spend, isn't it?
For one day.
Jan said I gave up my wedding dress to the local nursery school for them to play dressing up in. I'm still married. Have been for 59 years.
Well done. Even though your wedding dress is being worn by lots of different toddlers in the local nursery school. And Joan says, I hated mine, even though I married my soulmate, who I lost 5 years ago. I still remember my shoes on the day gave me blisters. The whole outfit went to a charity shop.
Well, there's 2 people now say they hated their wedding dress.
Yeah, I don't quite get that. No. I can understand you got the shoes wrong because they would be brand new shoes. They're probably white. You wouldn't wear them before the day.
Yeah.
Very, very unwise, actually. You should always break in shoes, shouldn't you? But Grant in Fife says you look very dapper this morning.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm off to play snooker after the show.
Well, no, I think your dapperness has been noticed and commented upon because it's hot in here this morning. And it's the waistcoat look. I like that.
Quite like it's just I think when the weather's nice, it's just sort of quite nice to just
I love a man in a waistcoat, don't you? I like waistcoats for women as well. I think it's just it makes I don't know, it sort of smartens you up slightly, doesn't it?
Oh.
But it doesn't overdo it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you do look dapper.
No, it's all right, isn't it? I just thought for a bit of a change.
Yeah.
Bit of a change.
It's a bit hot with your jacket on there anyway in here.
Oh, it is in here, yeah. Suits are too warm. And wedding suits. See, my wedding suit would be nice to wear on a day like this.
Yeah.
Nice
but
material.
a lot of people, in the end, when a wedding starts to warm up, you know, they take off and they've got the waistcoats underneath, and that's nice.
That's true.
Anyway, let us know what you think of Katie Price selling her wedding dress. Would you? Have you? And if you've kept yours, why have you kept it? And where is it? Would you know? And can you still get it on?
No, that's the thing.
That really is the thing.
But you've got to reach a point where you stop trying, I think. There you go. I don't know if I can get my suit on. Well, it'll still fit, but whether it'd be slightly tighter or
really?
not, I don't know.
It's only a few months ago.
A year ago. It's gone a year now.
Oh, crumbs, is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I suppose
but I don't think it will.
You haven't put any weight on since then.
Well, I don't think so, but you can never quite tell, can you? Anyway.
There's a lot of holding your stomach in on your wedding day, isn't it? Bracing yourself to look good.
Do that all the time here.
I had an elasticated waistband on my wedding
Did
dress.
you?
Because I'd just had a baby, yeah.
Oh, well, there
I
you
did
go.
everything the wrong way around.
Oh, it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. Look, keep your thoughts coming through on that one, as we, and no doubt on this as well, because what is happening with government at the moment, Nigel Adams has now become the third Tory MP to resign in just 24 hours following Boris Johnson's shock resignation.
Which, of course, has prompted, obviously, comments from Labour. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner called Boris Johnson a coward, saying he should accept the responsibility for his own actions.
So, is it the end for Boris Johnson? Is it the end for the Tory party in government for a while? At least let's talk to former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Good morning to you. What do you make of it all?
Good morning. Well, first of all, I hope I'll keep my seat on.
Well, you haven't got a waistcoat, have you?
I haven't got a waistcoat, but look, I think it's something that is a big distraction for the government. It's splashed across every front page today, Boris Johnson again. I think we've got to keep in mind the sense of perspective, because it was during Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, that he had 50 ministers that resigned from his own government, which brought his downfall. We're now talking about 3 backbench MPs, so it's not quite on the same scale. And
Do you think he was expecting more resignations, more support?
I think so. I think so. And but I think he is aware of the fact that he might not have the support that he once had on the backbenches, because when it came to the Windsor Framework Agreement, when Rishi Sunak was putting forward that vote and the deal on Northern Ireland, it didn't get that rebellion, the arch Brexiteers that I think was expected. And I think, whatever the outcome of the Privileges Committee, which, we're led to believe would have recommended a 10-day or more suspension for Boris Johnson, that was something that could have been put to the House, and it could have been amended by his own colleagues on the backbenches. So I think the fact that he probably weighed into account that they wouldn't come to his rescue is why he took the decision he did to resign as an MP.
Yeah, which is interesting, because all the talk of the comeback, I'm leaving Parliament for now and all this sort of thing, so he keeps the fires burning on that, doesn't he? But as you say, he sort of knew he wasn't going to get his backbench support anyway.
I think that's right, and I think that's why he's seized the narrative. And he said in a scathing resignation letter, I think it has to be said, but one that I think lots of people will read, wanting to make the Conservative government conservative again, cutting taxes, getting a deal with the US in terms of a trade deal, levelling up the country. These are all things that Boris stood for, and he's clearly, I think, hurt and bruised, because he does see this as the majority that he got in 2019. He's been able to, and the way he was able to do that was to reach across the political divide, get those seats in the Red Wall in the North, people that had never voted Conservative before and who may not vote Conservative again. He was able to captivate the country in that way. And so I think he has left politics for now, as you rightly say. He's left the door open for himself, but I think he's left it in a way where I think he's it's just all quite sad. But I don't think you can ever say never to Boris Johnson.
I mean, politics is ruthless business, isn't it? But and the Tory party has always been very well known for being ruthless when they want to get rid of a leader, or anyone, frankly. And I think here we've seen it, haven't we?
It has. It's a strange old party, because it's a political force. It's the most successful political party in the UK, but that's because of its ability to win elections. But in order to win elections, you might have to be a little bit ruthless and make sure that you've got the best team and or the right people sort of steering the ship. So, but of course you can't change leader, and that's not a prospect. Again,
well, they can't
in the next exactly.
Well, it would destroy the party, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, and it would be a disaster, and it would be the wrong thing to do, because I think what we were talking about earlier on is what the public want to see. And not just see and not just hear whether things are going in the right direction. They don't want to know whether necessarily inflation is coming down, although that is a very, very good thing. But they want to feel it. You need to feel the change. You need to feel as though that the government's on your side, that they feel as though their community has benefited from levelling up under a Conservative government if it hasn't had a Tory MP before. The country needs to feel as though things are making progress. I know that's a huge mission for the government in the next year or so, but you can only do that by getting behind the Prime Minister, making sure that it is a united party, united government, to go and deliver what you've promised.
So what do you make then of is it a tactic that we've got from Rishi Sunak at the moment, that there's just no response to any of this? He's just, I suppose the impression he's trying to give is that he's just getting on with the actual job that matters. But will that resonate with people unless, as you say, they actually feel the change?
I think so, and I think when you're as great a communicator as Boris Johnson is, I mean, there are faults and there are huge mistakes that he made. Obviously, that's why he's no longer the Prime Minister. That's why he had to resign last year. That's why he's now standing down as an MP. But you can't forget all of the good things about Boris Johnson being a brilliant communicator. During COVID, yes, absolutely wrong to be having parties in Number 10 when you're the guy setting the rules. But the things that he did do to test the machine of the civil service, to make the move even quicker when it came to getting a vaccine rollout programme or making sure that you had a ventilator programme, bringing all different parts of business together and kicking the tyres to get things done. So he has a huge qualities, but I think what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will do is just allow Boris Johnson, who is a brilliant communicator, let this story settle. You can't knock Boris Johnson off the front pages.
It might not settle. Boris could go on complaining and he could do a few more interviews and stir the pot even more, couldn't he?
Well, I think what you'd hope is in the next few months or so, yes, Boris Johnson has been very critical of the government at the minute, but as time goes on, and if it is the case, as I hope, and I'm sure it will be, that the Conservative government under Rishi Sunak does cut taxes before the next election, if there is a plan to continue to level up the country, if you do see the cost of living improving, if the economy is getting better, if you are cutting those waiting times in the NHS, if you are able to demonstrate that you've stopped the small boats coming over, then I think the former Prime Minister will say, this was all part of the 2019 manifesto. I'm glad Rishi Sunak's taken that on board. I fully now support him. And we can come together again as a Conservative family and see if that tips the balance in holding on at the next general election.
Oh, well, we shall see.
That's your plan, anyway.
Your plan, yeah. Charlie, really good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Really good to see you both.
Thank you. Well, also joining us now, and he'll have a few thoughts on this, is former Labour MP and Minister of State for Europe, Dennis McShane. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Anne. Good morning. Hi.
It's lovely to talk to you. Are you enjoying all this, or do you sit back and think, oh, my goodness, what's the world coming to?
Not in the slightest. I hate to reveal my age, but I first stood for Parliament in 1974. And, I'm a student of British political history. I have never seen such a decade of chaos and incompetence. Brexit has swallowed up, 5 prime ministers, 11 justice secretaries. It swallowed up Jeremy Corbyn and spat him out. It swallowed up a couple of Lib Dem leaders. We're the laughing stock of Europe, and this is just bad for the nation. I want people to be confident in Britain, invest in Britain, open up new jobs in Britain, but it's just not working. Yeah, okay, slight feel good for the Labour Party, but my goodness, if Keir Starmer forms government next year, as I hope, he will inherit a wasteland. And that's down to not just to Boris Johnson, it's just down to a mad period of madness which has seized the entire political class in recent years.
I mean, the problem is, it's looking at it from a slightly different perspective, but this is an open goal for the Labour Party. And all we've had at the minute is Angela Rayner saying Boris Johnson is a coward. We've had Keir Starmer demanding a snap election, which, you may as well shout it to the winds. What's the point? But then also we've had the whole point of Labour's massive policy, green growth to boost the economy, basically being scrapped. It doesn't give you much hope whoever wins the next election, does it?
I think, I'm not involved in any of these decisions, that what Sir Keir and the rest of the team are doing, I think calling people cowards is just not my language, but never mind, is simply avoiding making any negative headlines. And Rachel Reeves has come back, she's got a very good plan, but you just look at what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's doing, look what Jeremy Hunt's doing. There's a big poll in the Mail on Sunday today saying, the public think all 5 of Rishi Sunak's so-called missions. I must say, I would never advise anybody to do like Ed Miliband, 10 things I'll do, this, that, and so on. 5 missions. Nobody believes in them anymore. They think Rishi Sunak's failing at all of those things. I actually wonder if Rishi could be generous to Boris and give Boris his Southern California, San Francisco, Silicon Valley pad. It's a giant mansion with a swimming pool and everything. And Boris and his young family could go there for a year or two and start talking to Prince Harry, and they could sit there together every day moaning about how mean and unfair everybody is in Britain. I mean, that would just take a little bit of edge off his pain and discomfort right now.
Do you think, you like that idea, do you think 13 years in power is just too long for any government at all?
Yes. I mean,
even the Labour one that you approved of.
Look, 2008, when Gordon Brown had been in for about a year, I polled all the Labour MPs going to the Labour Party conference about an early election. They all said no because we all knew it was over. Not because of Gordon Brown's particular merits or demerits. He's a magnificent chancellor. Maybe didn't have that extra magic to be a great prime minister. But yeah, I mean, democracies need change. They need to refresh. And I was there in the 1970s when the country kicked out Ted Heath, but that Labour government, well, no, Anne, you were only a girl at school then, but that Labour government was not a great success, was it? It brought in Mrs. Thatcher for 11 years. So yes, I mean, I think Tories understand this as well. They have to just take time out, pause, a bit like Manchester United, work out why it was Man City that won last night and not Man United, go away and think again, and frankly find new MPs. There are younger people, I'm not going to give them any names because I don't want to damage them, who understand what a disaster Brexit was, how the incessant lies that gave us Brexit. I see the Daily Telegraph owners are being booted out now, so maybe the Daily Telegraph paper acts instead of running anti-European propaganda as it has done for the last 20 years.
Yeah, look, on that issue, because Boris Johnson has said a lot of this is driven by, his situation has been driven by anti-Brexit sentiment. We know, look, as far as we can read it, there is no way of getting back in at the moment. Even the Lib Dems are talking about trying to rejoin the EU now. But I'm intrigued by that you then brought it up, because what's the point in harping on about Brexit if we know it's done, or, sort of done, and that there is no way back?
Look, I listen to GBNews a lot, and you have distinguished people like Ben Habib, Richard Tyson, the Reform Party, others. Boris Johnson betrayed Brexit. And it's a bit like, the bunker in Berlin in 1945 with the Führer saying, if only I'm surrounded by loyal men and generals instead of these traitors who are doing terrible things to me. The plain fact is every business knows, every university knows, most citizens who have to queue longer for passports, at frontiers know, Brexit isn't working. Brexit can't be done because it's like saying get appeasement done or get imperial preference if you want a historical reference done. So, of course, we're not going to go back. That's for the birds for the time being. But I hope with a new government, it could even happen with a new Conservative government, because Rishi Sunak's made some little sort of overtures to the EU and to President Macron. We can bit by bit start to repair the relationship, which has been destroyed since David Cameron came into office, decided to have a populist plebiscite, which was going to be all about immigration. And I wrote a book, sorry to quote myself, Steve, in 2014 called Brexit, Why Britain Will Leave Europe. There's no referendum anywhere in Europe on the EU and immigration that hasn't been lost. Why on earth David Cameron thought he could win this insane gamble, I'll never know.
I'm fascinated by your mentioning looking for new young blood. Both sides, all parties. How do you actually do that?
Somebody's got to take a risk. For example, I'm not going to damage his career prospects, but Daniel Korski, a big advisor in Number 10, very clever man. He's running for mayor of London next year. I don't think he can win. I don't think London's going to vote Tory next year, as long as Rishi Sunak's there. But his campaign is brilliant. He's using Twitter brilliantly. He's pitching ideas from all over Europe, all over the world. It's really cool and smart. And it just needs, I think, one or two people to break the spell. A bit like, the first 20 years of my life, the Labour Party was viscerally anti-European and we didn't call it Brexit then, it was just anti-European. And then suddenly up pops a guy called John Smith, and then a guy called Gordon Brown, then a guy called Tony Blair, and said, this emperor is naked. It's ridiculous for a country like Britain to be anti-European. And suddenly everyone said, oh my God, oh, yes, you're right, good, let's give Labour a chance. Something like that. Now, it's not going to happen fast because the CBI and the British Chambers of Commerce won't say anything. The BBC continues its omerta of never criticising Brexit. There's more criticism of Brexit, actually, on GBNews than there is on the BBC. And you've also got the professions, the industries, the big papers. Let's just see. And I tell you what, when Labour is in charge of Brexit, so businesses will say to Gordon Brown, why are you messing up my business with your ludicrous Brexit rules? No, not Gordon Brown, sorry, Sir Keir Starmer. Whoops, showing my age. And Keir will say, nothing to do with me. It was a Tory decision. No, Sir Keir, you're the Prime Minister. And if you're still saying we can't travel normally to Europe, we can't attract investment because we're connected to the European single market, then it will be Labour's Brexit. And at that point, the Tories will say, my God, if we attack Labour on isolating Britain from Europe, maybe we'll start winning back votes.
Yeah, interesting. Just before you go, because it's always, we were saying yesterday, it's always fascinating when you talk to people who are now outside of the party, when they've stood down. What do you make the Privileges Committee? What are we to make of that? And obviously, you're not a Boris Johnson fan, and whether he's done anything wrong, we shall see. But Chris Bryant stood down as chair. He recused himself. Harriet Harman, who was very critical of Boris Johnson, almost seemed to prejudge this, did not recuse herself when she was then put up to that spot. Has it been whatever the outcome, whatever you think should have been the outcome, has it actually been a fair process when someone like Harriet Harman seemed to prejudge it?
I don't think she did. And just for a tiny correction, personally, I got on well with Boris. He's in great company. I've had dinner with him, I had lunches with him. I wrote for him when he was editor of The Spectator. I don't agree with him. I think he's a man who's never known the difference between truth and lies, whether it's about women, about politics, about Europe, about the party, about anything. But leave that to one side. Look, the majority of that committee is in the hands of the Conservative Party. The ranking member, the senior member of that committee is Sir Bernard Jenkins, who I've known since the 1990s. He is a passionate Europhobe, anti-European. He used to wear a little pound sign in his lapel 25 years ago. And he was the one who really shredded Boris Johnson in the hearings that we watched. No Labour member did that. Of course, I was in a different party, but the Privileges Committee is always chaired by a member of the opposition. You're not going to change that. And they made the decision they have. And Boris and Rishi also know that there's no support in the backbench Tory MPs. I mean, we've all heard of Nadine Norris. Her nickname in the Tory party was Mad Nad. And, she's very sparky and flighty and a bit batty. The other chap who's just resigned, I've never heard of. I think all those three seats, including Uxbridge, got every chance of being won by the Lib Dems or Labour. And so any sensible Tory MP would just be very happy, as I say, if Rishi gave his mansion in Silicon Valley to Boris for the next year. He took off his three lovely children and went down and started chatting with Prince Harry about how unfair life is for people at the top.
Or setting up a government in exile. That's what that sounds like.
It does a bit, doesn't it? Dennis McShane, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Gosh. What a vision, eh?
Well,
the Montecito vision.
Might work. You never know. Interesting analysis. And the nice thing about it, I love talking to people like Dennis McShane, because whether you agree with them or not doesn't matter, does it? It's about the fact it brings new ideas to the conversation, a new perspective that you may not have thought of
with a
before.
tremendous wealth of experience behind it.
Doesn't mean you have to agree with them.
The idea, I mean,
adds to
it's
it.
just so lovely to hear somebody like him saying, we need a period where all parties can look for some young blood, some young talent. And thankfully, he said it is there. It just needs bringing out.
Yeah. It's our turn, maybe. We're young blood.
Why would you want to go into politics?
Oh, I know, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
Why would you want to be Prime Minister at the moment?
Because you've at least
it's an almost impossible job, surely.
You've always got 50% of the population who disagree with you or don't like you or whatever, so what's the point?
Yeah.
But they do it, someone's got to do it.
They love it.
Anyway, we've got more to come, including, sadly, tax woes for small businesses. We'll tell you more. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
7:28, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Do get in touch with us. You have been. Thank you so much for your views on wedding dresses and what you've done with yours and whether you'd ever sell it. We're talking about that because Katie Price has decided to sell her wedding dress, the big pink flouncy one that she wore for her fairy tale wedding to Peter Andre in 2005. I think she's hoping to get quite a lot of money for it because she spent 20 grand back then on it, didn't she?
Yeah.
That's a lot to pay for a wedding dress.
Isn't it just? Jan, morning Jan, says, I have 3 wedding dresses in a box. Not all hers. Mine from 1976, my daughter Carolyn's from 2019 and my daughter-in-law's Tasha from 2022. I couldn't part with them.
Oh.
Which I get, but why have Carolyn and Tasha not got their own wedding dresses? Put away somewhere.
Well, Mum wants to keep them all. I don't know. There's an episode of Frasier where Daphne, who's getting married, I've been watching far too much television the last few months. Daphne is getting married. She decides she's going to wear her to-be husband-to-be's mother's wedding dress. But her mother has been married, or his mother had been married about 4 times, so she got 4 different wedding dresses. And they went from everything to, like, a mini dress that she wore in the 60s right through to... I just wonder if there's anyone watching who's got multiple wedding dresses because you've been multiple married.
And you kept them all. Yeah, that'd be quite something,
GB Views at GB News.
You set up your own shop.
Yeah.
On that basis, couldn't you? Anyway, let's catch up with Aidan, should we, this morning, because there's only one sports story that really is catching all the attention. Manchester City and the treble. They only went and did it.
Well, you mentioned 3 wedding dresses in a box. Man City got 3 trophies in a box as of this morning. They did the Premier League, 2-3 weeks ago. They saw off Arsenal, didn't they? And, of course, Man United, their local rivals, last Saturday. Despite United's attempts to stop them winning the treble, United, the only previous side in England to have done it before. And then last night, a really, really difficult assignment against Inter Milan. I did say it was going to be tight. I didn't think it was going to be processional. I didn't think it was going to be a case of City having to just turn up to win the match. They were given a real tough examination by Inter last night. They were suffocated all over the pitch. But you know what? The top sides find a way to win. 58 minutes. City were getting on top at that point, and Rodri stepped forward. I think he's played more games than any other Manchester City player this season, a real stalwart of the campaign.
Did he score any of the other goals in the other trophies?
I think it's only his 2nd goal of the season. Oh. So he's more of a holder. He's more of a holding midfielder, really. He's a hugely important, pivotal player for that team. But he was calm, and when he needed to be, there was a real scramble in the box. I think Foden got to the byline, pulled it back. It pinged around a little bit, and he stepped up and just stroked it into the net. I do think Inter had some really good chances. I think they probably just shaded it on the night. But you know what? You need a little bit of luck to win these major trophies. Man United had a rotten Champions League final when they won the treble in 1999. These finals don't tend to be great games anyway. I didn't think the pitch held up very well. It didn't really suit City's style. I thought that the surface was a little bit slow, possibly because of the heat in Istanbul yesterday. And we should say as well that before the match there were access problems as well. I mean, UEFA really have to look at themselves for holding matches in stadiums like these where the traffic is so difficult. City fans were rinsed in their cab fares trying to get to the stadium. Some of them took 3 or 4 hours to actually get into it. I mean, if you look at the stadium, it's in the distance on a hill. And I was grateful to be watching it in a cinema, quite frankly, because I did something different.
Did not do like didn't have trains or tubes?
They did. They were
bus
packed.
service.
They were packed apparently, but City fans reported that it was very difficult to get to the venue.
It's important that they don't just, book the place to do it for the sake of the city and all the rest of it.
Yes.
It's about the fans. They should look after the fans.
They do. I mean, Istanbul's notorious for traffic problems. I've been there myself, working there with Arsenal back in 2008. I mean, I could see the stadium at Fenerbahce from my hotel window, and I was told to allow 4 hours to get there. I mean, the traffic, it was rush hour, but yeah, I was late for the game. It was incredibly. And so last night, City fans were I think it's about the end it's about the access point as well. The Inter fans were in nice and early, and they were populating their end quite well, but there were 20,000 City fans in Istanbul last night, and they had real problems getting in there. Nonetheless, they're holding the trophy this morning. They've completed the treble. They're going to have the club have announced they're going to have a parade tomorrow.
They've taken the lesson from other
West Ham.
teams.
West Ham were criticised because they had theirs literally the following day. It didn't allow their supporters to get back from Prague to enjoy the day. Having said that, 70,000 West Ham fans did line the streets in East London on Thursday night. But City tweeted last night very quickly that they'd be having it on Monday. They will have prepared it in advance. You can't just throw these things out. And so it looks a little bit overconfident, but, it has to be done. It has to, from a logistical point of view, it has to be done.
That's going to be one heck of a party, isn't it?
Oh, massive, yeah, exactly. Pep Guardiola as well, afterwards, he said he thanked the club for sticking with him. He'd been there since 2016, hadn't quite managed to land the Champions League, finally achieved it last night. And he wants Manchester City to be able to go on and back this up with more Champions League wins. There's absolutely no reason with the quality they have that they can't go on and do that. He said that there have been plenty of teams who have been flash in the pan in previous years, in previous decades. He wants to build lasting success at European level. He's got lasting European.
So he wants to hold on to the job.
Yeah, he wants to hold on to the job. He wants to hold on to the trophy as well. I think. Why shouldn't he? I mean,
absolutely.
I think that I do think this is the best collection of footballers on the planet right now, and that might go on for another 2 or 3 years yet, because there's no sign of that team letting up. They're good ages. They're not, the average age of the side is roughly what the peak of a Premier League and European side should be. I'm not seeing any major departures.
Is it? Yeah.
49. I would say, I'm going to guess around about 27.
27?
That's roughly what a young... Arsenal were the youngest side in the Premier League last season. Southampton were the second youngest, I believe. But
has he been 27 and earning £500,000 a week?
Yeah, I know, yeah. But you got to score a few goals for that.
Because one of them does, doesn't
Erling Haaland. Yeah, well, a lot of them would be around that, yeah.
£500,000 a week?
I think go a bit crackers.
I remember John Barnes in the 80s was earning 10 grand a week, and we thought it was obscene.
Yeah.
It's too much, too young, I think. But there you go. That's a whole nother debate.
It really is.
Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Now, there are fears over a Labour tax raid that could drive out 40% of business owners. That's what a new poll is suggesting, anyway.
Yeah, a potential change in government is being named as a top factor for why businesses might be looking to sell up. One owner saying it would be a dagger through the heart of entrepreneurship if Labour were to lower tax rates.
Well, joining us this morning is business... Yeah. Well,
I don't understand that.
No, I'm not sure I understand it, but somebody who does is business and finance commentator, thank goodness for him, Michael Wilson. Hello, Michael. What is the basis of the story here? What are they so fearful of?
Fear and loathing. They're worried about the Labour actually saying it'll come in and do all sorts of things, and they've had to have a major U-turn last week, as they did about green taxes and so on. But that aside, what they're really worried about is the rate of corporation tax, which now stands at 20%. That being allied with the top rate of income tax, 40%. I mean, this is what they're fearing. Nobody's said anything about this, and Labour will deny this. But it's a strange thing that the majority of your viewers, I would suspect, who don't work for the civil service but nevertheless are working for a small business. And 40% of those surveyed, and these are businesses with a revenue of £5 million, which sounds a lot of money, but actually that's a relatively small business. That's what they're worried about. And people are actually saying, forget all this. We've got enough trouble at the moment. What the last thing we want is Labour to come in and tax us. And it may be that if Labour don't get in, and the Tories are forced to do the same kind of thing. But small businesses, unfortunately, face an enormous amount of, I suppose, what they call in the financial world headwinds, and this is just another fear. It may or may not happen, but that's the basis of what they're worried about.
I just find it absolutely fascinating, Michael, because despite the fact we've got the highest personal tax rates for, 70-odd years or so, and we know, obviously, business rates have been raised and all the rest of it, it's still the Labour Party which hasn't managed to lose that reputation of being a high-tax party.
I think this is what they're trying to do right now. I mean, Rachel Reeves, whatever you think about the U-turn on the green stuff last week, had a very, very good week in the United States. And what she was doing was telling for once in a politician's life, telling the truth about things, that actually a high tax UK is not necessarily a place where business needs to be started. And this is why Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, was talking to Joe Biden, the President of the United States, last week, talking about how he wanted the UK to become a tech hub, And one of the things that they want to do in this country is to become a hub of regulating artificial intelligence. Now, all these kind of things are really difficult to do, and they're a long way in the future. But you can see the way it's moving, and Labour has not been shy about trying to seduce business to its side by saying, you know, whatever you think about us, we are going to be the party of fiscal prudence. And that's what they're trying to do. Rachel Reeves, I thought, actually acted a bit too much like a politician last week, where she said the Labour U-turn on the Greens was down to the Tories wrecking the economy. Well, yeah, they may well have done. But actually, the reality about the UK economy is it's very, very small in world terms, and these tax increases will become necessary and will affect the total tax take. It's a question, really. It's like the old thing, isn't it? It's about plucking the turkey, taking the feathers off the turkey in as least painful way as possible.
Yeah.
OK. Michael, thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed. If you're watching at the moment, sitting up in bed maybe because it's a Sunday morning, you haven't got to go into business, but you are indeed a small business owner, or your job depends on a small business, get in touch. What are your fears and worries about that? We were a nation of shopkeepers, weren't we?
We were.
That was small business, yeah. And a country that doesn't look after its small businesses is going to lose its very lifeblood, I would have thought.
You'd think so. Well, all the green routes of recovery and everything all comes from SMEs. Anyway, let's say if you've got a view, let us know. We've got all the papers heading your way very shortly as Sir Keir Starmer appears to do another U-turn, this time over Labour's asylum policy.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:42. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yeah, thank you for all your comments about wedding dresses. Actually, on that subject, Rosemary has called in, or she's emailed in. No, she's emailed.
Yes, emailed. Yes.
She said this was my wedding dress. I think we got a picture of it 53 years ago.
Oh,
see,
look
a
at that.
mini. Isn't that lovely? Still got it, and we're still in love.
You see, now that is lovely.
But lots of wedding dresses aren't timeless, are they? They actually set you in a particular decade or a fashion style. Nada, we're talking about this, and we'll talk about it a bit more in a minute. Nada says, Katie Price is... we're talking about this because Katie Price is selling hers. Nada says, Katie Price, that her wedding dress was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Really tasteless.
Yes.
I'm not surprised she wants rid of it.
Karen in Stockport says, I've had two of them. Both went straight in the bin along with the husbands. There you go.
Oh, wow.
Fair enough, though. Let's go through the papers this morning. We're joined by the Deputy Editor of Spike, Fraser Myers, and writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Let's have a look at the Sun on Sunday, should we, Fraser? And another U-turn from the leader of the Labour Party.
The U-turns are really piling up for Keir Starmer, aren't they?
Quite a lot, isn't it?
So this latest one is he's going back on a pledge he made when he was campaigning to become Labour leader. He said that he would close down the Yarswood detention centre, the immigration detention centre, and he would stop people from being detained there indefinitely. Now he's changed his tune. He says we're going to get on top of the asylum backlog, which is obviously a major problem, and we're going to improve the conditions in these centres rather than closing them down. I mean, you know, could disagree whether that's a good or bad idea, but it just sort of adds to the sense that anything Starmer says, you know, could be contradicted, sometimes within a year, sometimes within a week. Only last...
Is it a U-turn, or is it me he just rethought something through? And maybe as he sees the prospect of real power only about a year away, he's having to be more pragmatic.
Well, sometimes, you know, he's looking at the polling, or he might be looking at the focus groups and things like that, but there is a sense that there are so many things where he has changed his mind or rethought on, and, you know, that would be disappointing to people who put their faith in him, the Labour membership in particular. I mean, so, for instance, he's changed his mind on tuition fees. He's gone back on his Green pledge recently.
Free movement.
Freedom of movement. Again, you know, it seems to be he is moving to a more pragmatic position on a lot of these issues. He's moving more towards where the country is. But there is a level of, you know, these were promises or pledges, you know.
Priorities.
Yeah, he could downgrade them to priorities now. So there is a level of dishonesty there, and I think it's right to call that out.
Or uncertainty as well, this sense that you immediately rush to say the popular thing, we'll shut them down, and then actually when it's thought through, he has to kind of row back and, as you say, take a more pragmatic approach.
Well,
that doesn't inspire confidence.
And but you do want also. I do like politicians with principles as well. Even if I don't agree with the principles, I think that's an important thing that's missing from politics. Because, you know, politicians can either be. I think it was Tony Benn who said politicians can either be sort of weather vanes, or I can't remember what the other one is. But you can
something else.
You can set the weather or you can follow it, essentially.
Yeah.
And, you know, politics is not a fixed thing. If you're in politics, you shouldn't be around just to follow the opinion polls. You should be changing people's minds, winning people over to your ideas, changing things for the better. And so it's disappointing to have actually not just in Keir Starmer but also Rishi Sunak. You know, we have two kind of politicians that are playing it safe, not really, you know, not making any bold gambles, and essentially just following the polls, which is not very inspiring at all.
Can we have a look at this in the Mail on Sunday about e-bikes? Emma.
Yeah.
Because there's been another fatality of a young man on an e-bike, hasn't there?
Yeah, there has. And these bikes, lethal, they're being called lethal in the Mail on Sunday. They can go, I mean, they're meant to go around 15 miles an hour, but they can go up to 30 miles an hour, which is...
Dangerous speed.
Dangerous speed. It's also faster. If you think about these many areas of London are 20 miles an hour zones, so that's way over that, and it's about as fast as a moped. Some of these e-bikes, they're big, they're heavy, you can soup them up. There's a call now for them to have number plates and for their drivers to be registered because they're reaching dangerous speeds. They're killing, as you say. There's been fatalities. There's a woman right near where I live in Dalston who was killed by an e-bike. And as a cyclist myself, with a toddler on the back, they can be extremely dangerous when they zoom by you.
Do you even
and
have
they
to
are
wear helmets and things?
Well, you don't have to wear a helmet.
You should do at that speed.
You should,
Well, it's recommended for any bike, isn't it?
Of course it's recommended, yeah, exactly.
But I had an e-bike and I was quite... I couldn't get used to the feeling of it being in control rather than me sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those ones that you pedalled and then the power came in. But I just didn't like it because it was like being on a motorbike.
Exactly.
It's something that...
And that they can reach speeds of moped sort of, levels. Really, really dangerous. They are very, as I say, very heavy, and they really can cause a lot of injury and damage to people. So, yeah, there's calls from MPs and from campaigners that there needs to be a lot more regulation of these. You get delivery drivers just zooming around, with lots of, stuff on the back. And
yes, they're using them a lot, aren't they?
Completely unregulated, so...
And untrained, you don't have to be...
No.
You have
and
to,
e-scooters
you have
as
to
well.
pass a test for motorbikes, but you don't for a motorised bike, which seems a bit crazy in retrospect, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think we do want to make use of these new technologies like e-bikes and e-scooters, but at the moment, thinking about e-scooters in particular, because there isn't really a kind of regulation or a law, that's when you do get people, riding them on pavements where it becomes dangerous.
They do ride them on pavements, but also the fact that you don't own it, that you've thought about it and you've, safely bought one and invested in it, the fact that you can just rent them by the hour, I think that encourages this kind of Wild West feeling that people just grab them, zoom across, whatever, have some fun. You see big groups of kids also doing quite dangerous things on e-bikes and e-scooters, and it can be, if you're an elderly person or if you have a small child on the back or whatever, it can be really quite frightening to be surrounded by all that.
I'm sure you might have a view on that. GBviews at gbnews.com. I'm sorry it's a bit short and sweet this hour, you two, but we'll have longer next hour and get through all these stories. Fraser, Emma, thanks very much indeed.
To some headlines now. The Prime Minister is being urged to call a snap general election after 3 MP resignations have left Rishi Sunak facing by-election battles. And the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says he must finally find a backbone and send the country to the polls after the Prime Minister found himself 3 MPs down in the space of 24 hours.
Manchester City fans are celebrating this morning after lifting the Champions League trophy for the first time. This was Manchester last night as Rodri put City in front in the second half and they held on for the win against Inter Milan. They're now only the second English team to complete a historic treble.
And weather-wise, there's more thunderstorms and temperatures of up to 32 today. It was the hottest day of the year so far yesterday. A yellow warning for thunder is in place, though, today until 9 o'clock tonight for Wales, Northern Ireland and most of Western and Central England. The Met Office says most of the UK is actually going to meet heatwave criteria next week.
Now a ray of sunshine, looking resplendent. Stephanie Tetchy is here. Good morning.
Stephen and Anne. It's like a sauna in here.
It is hot.
I feel like my foundation's going to melt off any minute.
Let's talk dresses.
Let's talk wedding dresses, because it's got everybody buzzing.
We've been talking about Katie Price's wedding dress. So this week, she set up an Instagram account where she's called it KP Memorabilia. So she's selling off all of her beloved possessions. This is in the middle of her facing a bankruptcy charge of £3.5 million.
Oh,
so I think she's trying to get a pretty penny. But this is the Isabel Christensen pink dress, wedding dress she wore to her wedding to Peter Andre. At the time, it was worth £20,000. It has a 7-foot train. Obviously, there's not really a lot of love lost between Katie Price and Peter Andre. But rumour has it she was actually trying to flog it for only about £350, which is, I think, is quite less than what she could get for
Oh,
it.
Yeah, because she's got a huge fan base
She
of people
has.
who would love her wedding dress.
Because I don't, in terms of buying it as a wedding dress, I don't think many people would want it. But I think because it is Katie prices, maybe in the future it could be worth a lot.
Yeah.
But it is quite interesting.
I mean, what else is she flogging off then? Because if she's one of raise a lot of money.
She's flogging off outfits that she's wore on Loose Women, pictures that she's taken. She's got one that was taken by Bryan Adams that she's flogging as well. But she's kept the Instagram on private, so only people who want to follow it get to see all that she's selling, because she knows it's going to make headlines anyway.
Well, absolutely, and it has done today. I mean, everybody's interested in that. So many people watching have got a view on what they've done with their wedding dress. But if they've got divorced, maybe that's what Katie Price feels, that, if you've already got divorced, then just get rid of the dress as well.
No, I think it holds sentimental value. I think it's good to just keep it in the wardrobe, especially as they have children together, Katie and Pete. So I think it's like, keep it for your daughter. She might want to do something with it in the future.
What I'm staggered about is how many GB Viewses we've had in today from people who hated their wedding dress on the day they got married.
No.
So they must have chosen it, and then by the time they got to wear it, they just hated it by then. What an odd thing to wear on your wedding day when you're meant to be feeling like $1 million.
Well, I guess taste changes. Like, people's fashion sense just changes as they grow older. Can you still fit into your wedding dress is always a big thing as well. And just the design, because when I think of my mum's wedding dress in the 90s, even though she looked stunning then, it probably wouldn't be a design that would be popular now.
I mean, you look back at Princess Diana's wedding dress, nobody would really wear anything quite like that now.
But it was
huge
classic,
at the time.
Iconic.
Yeah.
Talking about Princess Diana, we're talking about The Crown as well.
Oh, yeah, what's going on with The Crown?
So, with The Crown now, they're preparing for season 6, which is going to be the final season of it. And what's come out now, there's going to be a scene which is going to feature Olivia Colman, Imelda Staunton and Claire Foy. So they're going to be doing a tribute to the Queen as a roundup, because we've been watching The Crown for almost 60 episodes now. So they are going to bring all the queens together to celebrate Her Majesty.
Oh, how's that going to work?
I don't know. I
all
think
in the same room?
Yeah, all in
thing?
the same room. So this is going to be coming out later on this year. But, The Crown gets a lot of flack, whether, for their portrayals of the royals. So I think this is definitely going to be something that they've been planning from last year as a tribute to Her Majesty. And they're going to have this special wartime depiction of the Queen as well that hasn't been seen before. And that's going to be played by an actress called Viola Pretigion. So that will be also interesting as well.
It will. Stephanie, thank you very much.
Who's your favourite Queen?
Oh, I would Claire Foy.
Yeah, me too.
Claire Foy.
There you go. Thank you. We'll catch you a little bit later on. More to come, including more on that historic night in Istanbul for Manchester City.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hot and humid is the name of the game throughout Sunday for many of us as we import this rather hot air all the way from southern areas of Europe. There are occluded fronts around, so we are going to see some showers and outbreaks of rain throughout the day as well. Initially across parts of Scotland, and those will be pushing northwards as we head throughout the morning. Elsewhere, it's a generally drier and brighter start with a good amount of sunny intervals, but that sunshine is strong enough to start developing showers, and as we head into the afternoon we could see some particularly heavy ones and thundery ones in the picture. So for parts of western Scotland down into northwest England, Wales and parts of central England as well, we do have a yellow thunderstorm warning out for some heavy downbursts. The temperatures will be climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius once again today across southeastern areas of England. Combine that with the moisture, is going to be feeling quite humid for many of us. Those showers will take a little bit of time to eventually die down. Could be still thundery into the evening time, but generally some clear intervals developing overnight, though quite cloudy, misty across some coastal areas. Will be a muggy night for all of us. Temperatures holding up around the mid to high teens, so potentially that it does feel quite uncomfortable for sleeping in places, certainly in those urban areas. Starting off Monday then on a warm theme. Again, we pretty much repeat the situation where we've got some brightness early on, some sunny intervals, but the showers then begin to develop as we head into the afternoon. Like Sunday, they will be hit and miss, so not everyone is going to see them, but where they do occur, you certainly will notice them. There's the risk of hail and strong gusts of winds in association with those as well. Temperatures again climbing towards the mid to high 20s, if not 30 degrees Celsius for some areas once again. As we head towards the middle part of next week, the showers will tend to ease off and we'll see more in the way of drier and sunnier weather for everyone. Temperatures, though, staying in at least the mid to high 20s. Enjoy your day.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 11th of June. Today, well, another one bites the dust. A third Tory MP has resigned, throwing the party into chaos. So can the PM survive another attack from his own side? Manchester City have won their first ever Champions League and the treble after a 1-0 win over Inter Milan last night.
Donald Trump has branded the federal indictment against him as ridiculous and baseless. Will this stop him, though, from running to be the next US president? And Rebecca Ferguson says her friends and family thought she would take her life over vile industry bullying. We have all the latest with Stephanie Tetchy later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Loads of wedding dress stories.
Oh, ever such a lot, and really great ones as well. What was the one I wanted? A lot of people have things done to their wedding dress, made into christening gowns for grandchildren and things like that. And ever such a lot of you have been in touch saying that there is a charity, there probably are many, where you can donate your wedding dress, and because it's a beautiful material usually, it gets remade into babies' outfits, particularly babies who have been stillborn, things like that. There are charities that do that, and it's a way of making your wedding dress very useful indeed.
And another one, actually, years and years ago, I interviewed a couple who ran a charity for, and it was when one of the partners was terminally ill and they sort of wanted to get married in a hurry, you know. I often think about that. It was the lady in that case who was ill. Who I often wonder if she's still with us. I doubt it, actually. It's awful. But anyway, Helena in Essex says, I donated my wedding dress to a charity for brides with a terminal illness so they could have their special day. I think that is a lovely thing.
It's a brilliant thing.
Actually.
Helena says there are boutiques which specialise in selling once-worn dresses. I worked in one many moons ago, and one day a lady came in with her old wedding dress, which she asked me to sell. And then she asked if there was a new wedding dress for her because she'd met someone else. Oh, a lovely story.
And Tony says, my daughter advertised her dress for sale as worn once by mistake.
Yeah. There are quite a few of those coming in as well this morning. Anyway, it's great to be with you this lovely Sunday morning. I wonder if you're lying in bed watching us. Matthew's been in touch saying, this is my second morning watching your programme ever, but I was so pleased to find Stephen. Oh. And then somebody else said, Linda in Spain has said, I can't believe I found you on telly again, Stephen. Missed you.
Oh, I've never been away.
No.
I just upgraded channels. That's what I did. Well, morning to Linda in Spain and Matthew. I've just come back from Spain, Linda, so let me know whereabouts you are. I was on the Costa Blanca, where the weather was advertised as being horrible.
Oh, nice.
And it was lovely.
Oh, good.
So there you go. So very, very fortunate that I've come back and it's even hotter over here.
It really is.
But anyway, more on the weather as well a little bit later on for you.
Now, there's a lot to talk about this morning, particularly in the world of politics. The MP Nigel Adams has become the third Tory MP to resign in just 24 hours following Boris Johnson's resignation.
Yeah, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has now called Boris Johnson a coward, saying he should accept the responsibility for his own actions.
Yeah. And, of course, Keir Starmer has also been... where is he? In the Mirror, front page of the Mirror. Calling for a snap general election, as you would, I suppose, if you were the leader of the opposition at the moment.
Not a chance.
It won't happen, will it?
No, it won't. Let's get the latest from our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, who joins us now. Morning to you, Tom. I mean, what are we to make of all of this? I mean, is it civil war for the Tory party, as some of the papers are claiming today?
Well, it's certainly a headache for Rishi Sunak, and clearly what we're seeing is a relatively coordinated effort from allies of Boris Johnson to deliver that headache in perhaps the most painful way possible. It's clear there's no love lost between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, a man who Boris Johnson blames for his ultimate defenestration from power. But the big question on the lips of everyone in Westminster this weekend is, frankly, who's next? How many more by-elections might we see? Of course, Nigel Adams was so very close to Boris Johnson in his final months in office. He was known as Big Dog in number 10, coordinating the operations to keep Boris Johnson in power. Nadine Dorries, similarly, has been an absolute stalwart ally of Boris Johnson for many, many years. So eyes are looking to those who have also been very close to Boris Johnson recently, perhaps people who have been named in his honours list. One name that is on the lips of many people is Connor Burns. Could he, down in Bournemouth, be the next by-election? That is, of course, not confirmed. But what is a certain worry for the Conservative campaign headquarters is that although some of these seats have very, very large Conservative majorities, Nadine Dorries a 25,000 majority, Nigel Adams a 20,000 majority, Boris Johnson a 7,000 majority. In normal times, these would not be worries as by-elections, but these are not normal times. We've seen seats with majorities that are larger than 20,000 fall in by-elections in the last couple of years. So this is creating quite a lot of panic in Tory strategy headquarters. And this weekend, every single individual on the Conservative candidates list, everyone who's applied to be a Conservative candidate anywhere in the country, they've all been told to come to mid-Bedfordshire in order to start that campaign, start that canvassing effort to hold on to Nadine Dorries' former seat. And let's not forget, that's a seat with a majority of over 25,000 votes.
I suppose every seat is vulnerable at the moment, isn't it? Tom, thanks very much indeed. We'll leave it there because the signal isn't terribly good at the moment. I think Tom's getting ready in Southampton to be on a programme later on today.
On Camilla's show, he's doing the People's panel,
there you
so
go.
I was going to find out what the people of Southampton think about what's going on with all of this.
So they've got to do a bit of technical tweaking and get a better signal, I think.
Yes, they will. They will. In the meantime, let's see what Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, makes of it all. Morning to you.
Morning.
Conservative Home. The Conservatives got a home anymore? Because it seems that one of the papers saying it's a battle for the soul of the party.
Well, if so, it's a very lopsided battle. Boris Johnson's supporters currently, 3 of them, 100, only in October last year, there were almost 100 who were prepared to make him leader again, only months after he'd been forced out by the collapse of his government. So Boris Johnson has his core of hardcore supporters, but it's quite a small group, and I think sometimes they don't realise how small that group is, especially his supporters out in the countryside. So
I wonder how many there are and what they will be thinking. I mean, asking them to resign at the moment is a bit much, isn't it? Maybe it'd be better off to have support still there within the party.
Well, you would have thought so, right? I mean, if you think about it in the past, the SDP, for example, the great Labour split in the 1980s, they went and founded their own party, and that meant they got to stay in Parliament, they got loads of press and media attention, they'd get their 3 of them now, they'd get short money, right? The money that Parliament sets aside to help opposition parties function. That's probably hundreds of thousands of pounds of parliamentary work that they don't get. And now they're out of Parliament. And Boris Johnson is much less potent out of Parliament, right? He's not there as the prince over the water. He's not there just in case everything goes horribly wrong. So it's a baffling strategy, if it is a strategy.
And, of course, it's an admission that he doesn't think he'd survive the Commons vote and he doesn't think he'd survive a by-election if it was triggered in his own constituency.
That's the strangest thing, because there was polling from Lord Ashcroft just the other week. Lord Ashcroft did a big poll just in Uxbridge and North Ruislip, which is Boris Johnson's constituency, that suggested he'd still win. And, he's Boris Johnson. I wouldn't have put it past him. He could have turned the entire thing into a sort of one-issue campaign on ULEZ while everyone else shouted about Partygate. And if he'd won, it would have completely transformed the narrative about Boris Johnson, right? He'd have been back in a really tangible sense. And yet he clearly decided, actually, he didn't feel up for that fight. And it's difficult to see how he even gets back into the Commons now, because it's not as if an independent. It's not the old days when the Tory association just picked whoever it liked to go and become a Conservative MP.
I was going to ask about that. What is the process? If he did think that I'll spend the summer, regrouping, building up some strength, maybe making a bit of money, and then I will ask for a seat somewhere, a nice safe seat somewhere. Is that what happens? Who decides?
Why would Rishi Sunak give him that? So in the olden days, back before the 97, Tory associations could essentially pick whoever they liked. They were all independent, and that's how you end up with so many characters, shall we call them, in the Conservative benches. These days, you have to be on the candidates list, and the candidates list is confirmed by CCHQ, the central party. So Rishi Sunak would have to sign off on Boris Johnson becoming a Tory candidate, getting on the list that gets to pick safe seats. I cannot see him doing that. If anything, if I were Rishi Sunak and Boris wanted to come back, I'd be like, OK, we'll reselect you for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and you can actually face your electors. But giving him mid-beds or somewhere like that would be absolutely ludicrous.
So what do we make of... I mean, is it the Sunday Telegraph this morning? I don't know. A lot of people, a lot of backbenchers saying, and a lot of sort of fairly important people in the 1922 committee saying, actually, Rishi Sunak should bar him from being a candidate again. Now, there's a big difference between barring him and him not being selected for the candidates list, isn't there? Would barring him actually be a step too far?
No, I mean, basically, if he's refused from the candidates list, he is effectively barred, because that means nobody can choose him.
Yeah, but that wouldn't have to happen for quite a while, would it?
Yeah, I mean...
Rather than barring him would be like saying now.
Barring him, like ruling it out now, I think the reason Rishi hasn't done that is perhaps because it would just add fuel to this story. And I think Rishi understands that ultimately...
It would look almost spiteful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this story is not doing Rishi any good. I think in the medium term, the politics of it, not having Boris Johnson in Parliament, is probably fine. And if we're entirely honest, if the Tories lose all 3 of these by-elections, in parliamentary terms, it's just 3 MPs who don't want Rishi to be Prime Minister being replaced by 3 other MPs who don't want Rishi to be Prime Minister and are in another party. But the story's bad. So I reckon let the heat die down, Boris thrives off oxygen, and then just don't let him onto the candidates list. Yeah.
And he's not likely to ever want to stand as an independent or form his own party, because that's just not him, is it? He's a Tory. I mean, he feels he's a Tory.
I mean, it would be extraordinary. Of course, the most funny, I worked out the funniest outcome would be if he did what Enoch Powell did and he comes back as a Northern Irish MP, right? You know, Enoch Powell came back as an Ulster Unionist. Boris, you know, goes off and stands for the DUP somewhere and comes back. But no, realistically, it's hard to see. And again, if you're going to found your own party, you found your own party in Parliament, right? If he and Nadine and Nigel had defected and they'd set up a new party, as I said, they'd have got short money, they'd have got hundreds of thousands of pounds, a continual profile, there'd have been a nucleus there that other people could have defected to if the polls are still terrible. I think that could have been viable. I don't know if it would have won many seats, but you can see how a few of them in the Red Wall might have held out by breaking off from the Tory brand. Resigning and then doing the hard work of setting up your own party? No.
Do you think he regrets it at all? I mean, you get the feeling when he put out that 1,000-word statement the other night, Thursday night, wasn't it? Right. That he was writing it in a bit of a fury. And I wonder if that was a knee-jerk reaction, and maybe the next day he has thought this. Yeah,
if you read it, it's not the Boris that everyone, even Boris's supporters, you know, it was really angry and petulant, I think. And also, I think, frankly, even if he'd lost the by-election, you know, Michael Portillo had that epic defeat in 1997. Long term, it didn't do him any harm, right? Because it discharged a lot of what people then disliked about his political brand. And I think that if Boris had gone down fighting, that would have again balanced the scales a little bit. Instead, it just looks like he's running. And I think if he had lost that by-election, I think that he'd have had more chance of coming back and saying, look, you know, gosh, I was humiliated, wasn't I? Woo, I'm Boris.
I'm intrigued, though, by your position, because you're not coming across as a particular Boris fan.
I mean, I'm not.
Well, right, fair enough. But, I mean, we get it from a lot of our emails and views, of course, and you must get it from a lot of Conservative Home readers, that some people... Other people just think Boris is the man who can win an election for the Tories. So how do you balance that?
It is challenging. I think the Boris, a bit like Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher never lost a general election, and so a lot of Margaret Thatcher's hardcore supporters were always able to say, but she never lost a general election. She would have lost in 1992. Similarly, the reason Boris is no longer Prime Minister is because more than 50 members of his government resigned. That was not a viable... You know, if that circus...
It's unprecedented.
If that circus had continued, the Conservative poll rating, we'd have probably had an early election and it would have been a disaster. And I think the thing that frustrates me about Boris Johnson is he has genuine talents, and the way that he managed to reach out and build a connection between the Conservative Party and millions of people who'd never voted for it before was genuinely really good. But he didn't deliver on it. He was Prime Minister for 3 years, and you read his resignation letter, and he mentions things like he has a go at Rishi Sunak for scrapping the retained EU law bill. Boris Johnson didn't table the retained EU law bill. We had to wait for Liz Truss for that legislation to even happen. He attacks Rishi Sunak for raising taxes. Boris Johnson broke a manifesto commitment in order to raise national insurance. So the rhetoric and the ability to connect with people is really good. But what frustrates me and many other people who have sort of gone off Boris Johnson is the fact that he never followed through. And we're now going to go into a general election where millions of people voted Tory for the first time in Northern England and other places. And what have they got to show for it? And I don't want them to be once bitten, twice shy. I want the Conservative Party to be a presence in those places, because it's better for our democracy if there aren't millions of people who can't vote for one of the big parties of government.
However, I always feel one has to say he did, however, win a massive majority general election, thinking he was going to be the Brexit Prime Minister, and then COVID happened.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, Boris Johnson's prospectus was relatively simple. It was, you know, it was win and then be a bit more spendthrift, basically, than the Conservatives normally are on the Red Wall. And that would have been fine. But he did have to deal with COVID, and COVID cut against his instincts because he was a relatively libertarian, personally. He didn't want to be locking people down. And also it involved spending all the money.
Yeah.
So that we got to the end of COVID and we'd hosed really hard to get your head around how much money we spent on things like on furlough. And there just wasn't the money there for the kind of really big investments that we were planning to make. So it's by no means is it entirely Boris Johnson's fault.
No, but then does that lays more criticism at his feet then, doesn't it, when he says, well, Rishi Sunak should be reducing taxes? Well, part of the reason we've got higher taxes is trying to balance all that out, isn't it?
I mean, yes, it is. But ultimately, the reason tax cuts are going to be increasingly difficult is that if you look at the big drivers of tax cuts, NHS demand's only going to go up. Social care demand is only going to go up. Like, all of the really big ticket demands on state financing are only going in one direction. The pensions triple lock is close to becoming part of the Constitution. But that means that you're committing vast amounts of money to ensuring that pensions grow faster than incomes every year. It's and if you, this is the problem with Liz Truss, right? You know, people say Liz Truss was brought down because she spooked the markets and so on. But even if that hadn't happened, I was there at Tory conference with people trying to work out where the money to balance those tax cuts was going to come from. She couldn't find it. Unless the Tories can actually change something big about how the state works and what it does, there is simply not the scope for substantial tax cuts now or at any point in the medium-term future.
All right. Does that mean then, because a lot of people say tax cuts are the only way Rishi Sunak could
win the next election?
Win the next election. Is a Labour government inevitable?
I wouldn't say a Labour government is inevitable. It's certainly much more. It's certainly the likely outcome of the general election, I think. But Labour are going to find themselves in a very similar position if they win, right? You know, taxes are already very high. There aren't like magic pots of money that you can get by windfall taxing anything. So ultimately, I think the problem is that whatever party you vote for, given those huge demands on the state that I just listed, actually the range of political manoeuvre for either party is relatively narrow, at least on the economy. Neither of them can either hike taxes a huge amount because they're already historically high. Yeah. Neither of them have freedom to cut them.
Oh, interesting. Henry, really good to see you.
Pleasure to be on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See, now that's interesting.
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
Can anyone do what needs to be done?
No.
Can anyone, whatever you...
Possibly not. It's that whole back to that whole thing, though. Do we believe what any of them are actually saying then, as a result? Which doesn't help my confidence, I've got to be honest, at 8:17, when the Prime Minister is being urged to call a snap general election after those 3 resignations and the by-election battles. That's, of course, Keir Starmer, who says the PM must finally find a backbone and send the country to the polls. But, of course,
it's not going to happen.
It's like blowing in the wind. What a thing to say, because it's not going to happen.
Meanwhile, Manchester City fans have been celebrating because, of course, they won the triple, didn't they? The treble. Do you call it a triple or a treble?
I don't know.
Anyway, they won it anyway. And the scenes in Manchester last night were fantastic as City, in the first half, didn't score at all, but then they did get a goal in the end, and that's what clinched it. They're now the only the second English team to complete the historic treble.
Be careful what you wish for today. If you're finding it too hot and want a bit of rain, you may get it, because more thunderstorms are predicted today, but also temperatures of about 32 degrees. It was the hottest day of the year so far yesterday. There's a yellow warning for thunder in place until 9 tonight for Wales, Northern Ireland, most of Western and Central England. And the Met Office says most of the UK will meet heatwave criteria next week.
I wonder what that means. I wonder what heatwave criteria is.
I don't know.
Is it a certain temperature? Is it certain days of a certain temperature? Thunderstorms?
Yeah,
it
must be an extended...
several boxes to tick to be heatwave criteria. I don't like the sound of it, though, do you?
No, I don't know, but it's just like lots of people got in touch yesterday, didn't they, saying, well, we coped with this weather before. Do we panic too much now?
We just talk about the weather as we always have, haven't we?
I think we probably panic a little bit too much about these things, but you've got to be a little bit careful. Adrian's been in touch on the whole Boris stuff. I just want to say I'm sick of hearing about 13 years of Tory failure. I think people are forgetting that when they took power back in 2010, there was no money available to do anything, so they introduced austerity. That's a fair
do you remember
point.
the days of austerity?
Of course, austerity was it was heavily criticised as not being the right plan, wasn't it, at the time? But perhaps, it's looking back on it now, I don't know if it was the right plan or not, but Labour said they wanted to borrow their way out of it at the time, when now they've gone to the opposite side of the table.
And some people would say, go the old-fashioned way and build your way out of it. Build things, build the society, because in the end the money will come back. Clive in Toaster says, I'm a technical director and part owner of a small tech business, with both major parties being, in my view, anti-small business and determined to extract every possible pound of tax. I have serious doubts about whether our business will be able to survive the next few years.
And Judith says it would be great if the government helped small businesses by putting the VAT threshold up so we can actually make a living wage. Yeah. We went to a small business in Toaster, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
That's where we got our tattoos.
Tattoos, yes.
Done in Toaster. Morning, Terry.
Morning.
Watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep your thoughts coming through. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be talking to Aidan McGee about that historic Manchester City treble in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8:24. What have you spotted?
Well, Christian, thank you very much for this, Christian. Christian has emailed in saying, I am a straight man, but I must say Stephen looks very nice and smart in his waistcoat.
Oh. Well, thank you very much for clarifying.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, well, there you go.
It is. It's the waistcoat look. It's a sexy look, I think, the waistcoat look.
Sexy. Oh, there you go. Not what Wilhelmina said in, I forgot where, Leicester.
Oh, yeah, no, she criticised your baggy
She said
sleeves.
it's not I can't tell which arm I'm lifting up. She said the sleeves were too baggy and I should wear a slim fit. It's not a slim fit, but if you wear a slim fit, then I find them like they really pinch at the waist because I'm not slim enough for a slim fit.
No, and anyway, I mean, then those sleeves aren't baggy.
But Wilhelmina works in menswear.
Oh, yes, I know you know your stuff, Wilhelmina.
But, you know, no, I don't feel comfortable in a slim fit. I always just feel like I'm a bit pinched in.
Look, you're lovely. And according to Christian, you look very nice and smart.
Well, thank you, Christian, very much. Hope your girlfriend doesn't mind.
Now, shall we talk football? I never thought I'd ever say that on telly. Let's talk football. But I mean, what a remarkable story. Man City, Aidan McGee is with us. It is. It's lovely when winners win and you feel good.
It was their time. Definitely, it's their time. I mean, I do think they are the best team, best club side in the world at the moment. I think they probably have been for 2 or 3 years now at least, and they probably were before that as well. They came close a few times. They reached the final 2 seasons ago. They were really close last year in the semi-final, and that would have given them a final against Liverpool. It wasn't to be. And Pep Guardiola...
I was going to say, just for those who aren't into football, what is the significance of winning the treble?
Well, there are all sorts of different types of trebles, actually. You mentioned triple and treble earlier on. Triple tends to be used in rugby, as we talk about the Triple Crown. Treble is the word used in football generally. But City actually did a treble in 2018-19 because they won the Premier League, the FA Cup and the League Cup. But they didn't do in the Champions League. But the best treble you can get. And Inter could have won the treble last night, their own treble. That usually means the domestic league, domestic cup, the main domestic cup, and the UEFA Champions League. City have done that first time since 1999. In fact, I was at Wembley in 1999 when they came out of the 3rd tier, and they were in desperate situation back then. They got through on penalties against Gillingham to get through to the 2nd tier. That was the week United won the treble. When City did that, when they actually came out, when United did that, the two clubs were poles apart. They really were. And steadily, bit by bit, with the investment they've had from the Abu Dhabi group from 2008 onwards, they've made up the ground. And they are the eminent side in Manchester now. They may not be the biggest, but they're certainly the most successful by a long, long way. And last night was it was a really tough game for them. You know, I did feel they'd win. I was confident they would win, but Inter made it really, really difficult for them. Inter probably had the better chances, probably shaded it on the balance of play. And sometimes you need a little bit of luck in these finals. Their goalkeeper saved one with his feet without looking. There was Romelu Lukaku came on for Inter, looked very threatening, but missed 2 big chances, which would have seen them prevail, or certainly at least taken it to extra time. And Guardiola said afterwards as well, he said, look, it's a massive relief to win this Champions League because he didn't feel fulfilled as the Manchester City manager until they'd done it. He's been there since 2016, don't forget. He's not won it individually as a coach since 2011, having won it in 2009 with Barcelona and again with Barcelona 2 years later against United at Wembley in 2011, which I was at. So there's a little bit of bloodletting involved. He also thanked the hierarchy at Manchester City for keeping faith with him. There are other owners or ownership models that would have said, well, you know, he's good, this Pep guy, but he only wins domestic trophies, doesn't win anything in Europe. And they stuck by him, and they gave him investment, and they gave him support, and eventually it got done. And I went to the cinema last night to watch it as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you went to one of these lovely, they are lovely, posh cinemas where you can have a really comfy chair.
Yeah, but there's myself and James, for benefit of our radio listeners, that's my nephew James there in front of the big screen, and there's me there, just out of shot of my...
lovely reclining leather
I've got no shoes on, I've got bare feet on that as well, you know, and I've got the water.
And they bring you food and drink as well,
They do.
So
And it's good, actually, because when you're watching football, you get a half-time.
Yes.
Which you wouldn't get in a normal film. Yeah, and also you can talk at normal volume because there's obviously there's atmosphere, there's commentary going on. Normally you're whispering to each other in the cinema if you've got something to say. So it was a good experience. Not something I've done. I tried to do it last year, but the feed failed as soon as I got there for the Liverpool-Real Madrid game. But it was good. Went over the road to we got the bus home as well, the 336.
Yeah. So, was the atmosphere on the bus?
No, really. I think we were the only ones on it. No one gets the bus these days, do they? But I asked for a single to the road, but you don't do it there anymore, and you just wave your card over the.
Of course you do.
Over the sensor.
Oh yeah.
The buses have changed a lot in the last few years.
Exactly. Still got 4 wheels though.
Yeah. What does all this mean for City, for the Blues?
Well, it means prestige. They have won a European trophy before, but that was in the late 60s. That was in the time of Francis Lee. This winning the Champions League is such a difficult thing to do. Even a club that's well moneyed and well supported and well invested like Manchester City have struggled to get over the line, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. So it's about prestige. I was there in 2010 when they did one of their first pre-season tours outside of Europe, and in New York they were struggling to... It wasn't really a football public anyway. They'd heard of Man United, they hadn't really heard of Manchester City. The CEO at the time, Gary Cook, was trying really hard to boost their profile. It's taken a long, long time. Chelsea had the same problem as well. When they went to the States, they weren't well known. Everyone knows over there, they know Man United, then Liverpool, probably Arsenal, the third team. And that's before you consider the other really big European sides around the continent, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich.
But last night their owner turned up to watch them.
Second time since...
Only the second time since he bought them?
Since 2008. Yeah, I mean, look, he's still got other people on the ground watching, you know, and managing the thing. But that's the interesting thing about Middle Eastern ownership. People criticise it sometimes, but they're not... I've seen lots of megalomaniacs buy football clubs and make a mess of it. And the reason they want to be in there because football clubs gives you owning a football club gives you an instant public profile. They're not that interested in that.
What is it? Do they see it as an investment?
Well, yes, possibly. I mean, well, not necessarily. Very few people make money out of football clubs.
So
really.
why are they interested if they're not mad about?
It's
football?
controversial. It's sport. It could be termed as sport washing. Some people think that's OK. I don't know whether. I mean, I'm talking about it with Michael Portillo later on today about the issue of sport washing and what Middle Eastern ownership means for. Well, in the case we're talking about golf later in the day. But it's happened in football a few times. Obviously, Newcastle have been taken over. City was one of the first. In fact, it was the first, really, 2008. PSG in Paris was taken over. So it's about improving the image globally, the prestige of countries that maybe don't have the best record in terms of things like human rights.
Yeah.
They maybe have an image problem and they use it. I'm not sure it necessarily works, but the ownership models are very, very good. They're not the individuals involved don't really seek fame. And they say they don't seek fortune. They've already got that. It comes out of a hole in the ground. It's called oil. And so they get the profile. They get the profile, but they're not really standing up front and centre, taking a public profile out of it. They step back. They provide the support, but they let, in the case of a football club, they let the football people get on with the job. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Maybe it just feels nice to be rich enough to own things.
Well, yeah, but if I bought it, I'd watch it more than twice.
Well, I would.
Yeah. More than of course I would. Yeah. If I owned a football club, I'd go to every game.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I suppose
go more than twice.
If they're not, if they're not a football
in 15 years,
if they're not a football fan, it's just like.
Well, why buy a football club?
Because a lot of very, very super rich people just like to acquire things.
Yeah. Well, I've seen people
portfolio.
buy football clubs down the years, and they're literally just doing it. They can be very successful in other areas of their life, but they buy a football club knowing they're probably going to lose money, and they're just prepared in their mind to. You have to have an idea how much you're going to lose, but what you get out of that is instant fame. And there's not many ways in life you can do that.
No,
Go on,
I
Big Brother.
not.
You know, but that's short. That's short, isn't it? That's short-lived.
Yeah.
But then the problem comes when the heat gets turned up, when things start going wrong. It hasn't really happened for Manchester City because they've had pretty much unassailable success in 15 years compared to what they had in the previous 30 or 40 years. Yeah, it's a lovely day. And they've got a parade tomorrow at 6:30 in Manchester.
Yeah, it'll be amazing. That will be amazing. That will be amazing. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you.
I keep thinking of one of my old directors, a guy called Neil Hunter, who was always obsessed with Manchester City, as I've been thinking about him today.
You'll be thrilled.
So should you be watching Neil, I hope you're enjoying the moment. It'll be really, really chuffed.
Yeah, in fact, if you're a City fan and you've just been having the most fantastic last 24 hours, do get in touch and tell us what it feels like.
Anyway, we've got much more to come for you, including a look at the papers with Emma Wolfe and Fraser Myers. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
8:37, Anne is busy engrossed in the views.
Because Alan has emailed in and said, please remember, we're not all going through a heat wave. It's really cool up here in Sunderland.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, Alan.
Maybe it'll warm up later in the day.
Yeah, Daryl says, I'm so sick of these nanny state warnings, treating us like we're thick. It's summertime, folks. It gets warm. It's England. It doesn't normally get warm. Or the UK, I should say.
Oh, look, listen to this one. Wedding dresses are really catching fire here. Oh, no, I don't mean that literally. Chrissy in Ledbury says, a few years ago, a colleague and I hosted a Wear Your Wedding Dress Again fundraiser for cancer charities. It was a huge success. People came in their favourite wedding outfit if they hadn't got a wedding dress. A local hotel gave us use of a room. Someone made cake and business gave some fantastic raffle prizes. The oldest bride was over 70 and still in her dress.
Oh, that's
well done.
Nice. And, this one, Maureen... because I like this, because I'm an old romantic, me. In 1960, my mum and dad bought my wedding dress, second-hand, cost £6. It felt beautiful, and I've enjoyed 63 happy years with a wonderful husband and still going strong. Oh, Maureen.
All on a dress that only costs £6.
That melts my heart.
I tell you what, this is a lovely one. Pamela says, I put my wedding dress and veil into a builder's skip after my divorce. I regret it now, as it could have been passed on to my granddaughter. The twist is that my husband and I got back together some years later.
Oh.
See, don't throw it away.
No. I mean,
bung it in the loft if you really don't like it anymore.
I knew a couple. It was my school friend's parents who got married and divorced twice.
To the same people got married and divorced twice.
Yeah.
That means they tried again and it still didn't work.
It still didn't work.
Look, that's
interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go.
That's a good one for you, if you
another
want.
story. Let's go through the papers this morning with Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and the writer and journalist Emma Wolfe. Good morning.
Morning.
Emma.
I'm not going to tell you what I did with a former engagement ring.
Oh, yes.
No, I'm not. I'm really not going to.
You are now. You've got
chucked it in the Thames.
Did you?
Did you?
Which was silly, really. I mean, thinking about it calmly,
isn't it?
I could have sold it and given that money to charity.
Yeah.
It's a silly thing to do, but it felt like the right thing to do at the moment, at the time.
OK, well, fair enough, fair enough.
Not a wedding dress, fortunately.
No. Sunday Times, COVID.
Well, there's long been speculation, obviously, about the source of COVID-19, obviously centring around the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And there's really interesting insight investigation from the Sunday Times has been uncovering proof that scientists in that lab working alongside the Chinese military, apparently, were combining the world's most deadly coronaviruses to create a mutant virus just as the pandemic began.
Now, we've heard rumours like this before.
We have.
But this is the Sunday Times Insight team who appear to have found evidence.
Yeah, they talk about a lot of evidence, hundreds of previously confidential reports, hundreds of documents, internal memos, scientific papers and email correspondence that's been obtained through sources or through freedom of information. But we know that there's been a massive lack of transparency from the Chinese authorities. So it's been really hard to get this kind of get any information out of China.
So they're not saying this created COVID-19. They're just saying it was created. Whatever this was created as COVID-19.
Well, they say that it's not clear whether it was natural or a leak. Fraser knows quite a lot about this, so I think he can enlighten us.
Well, it's pretty clear. I mean, a lot of people have been saying that the virus doesn't have a natural origin because it has these certain features that don't occur naturally, which have made it more contagious, which made COVID more contagious. And interestingly, the closest related virus that is natural was in this Wuhan lab. We know that people were sampling it and that they were working on it. And what I think is just as disgraceful as the kind of Chinese cover-up has been the Western cover-up. So there were scientists in the UK, in the US, who privately felt that this was probably a lab leak. Some of them had been involved in this kind of research. It's called gain-of-function research, where you sort of play with viruses. The aim actually is to save people, to develop vaccines for future pandemics. Obviously, didn't work out this time.
Some had been to Wuhan and actually worked with, or at least observed, the Chinese scientists working on it.
That's right. And there was a scientist called Peter Daszak who works for a company called the Eco Health Alliance, and he'd put in a funding application to do this kind of research on bat coronaviruses in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's Jeremy Farrar, formerly of the Wellcome Trust, now a chief scientific director of the WHO. He privately felt that it was 50-50, that it was likely to be a lab leak, but he and Daszak and other scientists organised an open letter to The Lancet saying, do not question, this virus is natural. Anyone who says otherwise is a conspiracy theorist. The media ran with that. They said anyone who says it's a lab leak, comes from a lab, is racist. Facebook and social media were censoring people who said that it might be a lab leak.
But the interesting thing is, though, the fact you're saying a leak, whereas, of course, some of the implications from some people were it was deliberately targeted.
Working in conjunction with the Chinese military to develop these mutant viruses as a bioweapon, which is a very different thing to it being just a leak.
So what do we do with this? Now that the Insight team have come up with this, what happens next? Who is the world authority that can sanction China for this?
Yeah, that's anyone's guess. But I think it should make people pause a little bit, think about, should we be doing this kind of research, or should we be more transparent and open about this kind of research? Because it isn't just China. It's the United States and the West funding a lot of this research in China precisely because it's not transparent. Because possibly it might outrage people if they were doing it in London or something like that. So they are also using China to get around the problem of transparency. And clearly the scientific community doesn't want to have a conversation about that. They would rather shut things down because they think, quite rightly, that it will damage their reputation.
Do you know what scares me about this? And it's all life imitating art and all the rest of it. I'm currently watching on Prime a show called The Last Ship. Which was made in 2014, and it's almost exact.
It's very good too, isn't it? I've seen that.
But it's this. It's this.
Yeah, but I mean, experts.
These viruses, pandemics, will happen again.
Yes.
These things are going to happen again in the next 10, 20 years. How are we going to respond next time?
Yeah.
The idea of going back through what we've been through in the last 3 years.
And the irony is, if we do assume that this project was, well-intentioned, with the plan of saving people from pandemics, I mean, the other, of course, theory is that it could be a bioweapon. But if it was to save people from pandemics, then that shows the dangers of sort of safetyism. The fear of a pandemic brought one about, essentially, which is quite a scary thought.
Hugely ironic,
Oh, dear. Fraser, let's have a look at the Sunday Telegraph. The BBC wants to curb liberal bias. They want to recruit people with diverse opinions.
Yeah, well, we know...
Shock horror.
We know the BBC is obsessed with every other type of diversity, the superficial kind, skin colour, sexuality, things that really shouldn't matter. And finally, they're thinking of looking into diversity of opinion, because everyone, knows that the BBC has a relatively liberal bias. People say it's left-wing. I don't think that's quite right.
It's true.
And it's not necessarily... It's not as if they campaign for any one party or anything like that, but you can sometimes...
But does this seriously mean they're going to interview candidates for jobs, journalistic-type jobs, and grill them about their own political opinions? Because if you're a true journalist... No, that's right. And if you're a journalist wanting to work for the state broadcaster, the BBC, in the world of news, you shouldn't have an opinion.
It's strange, isn't it? Because you should be able to have faith that journalists or, you know, think of other institutions that should be impartial, like the civil service. You should be able to have faith that people can do their jobs and put their biases to the side. I would much rather that than people being grilled for their opinions.
It's about having opinions and being a person, but also being able to report a story and not bringing your biases or your opinions or, you know, your own perspectives in. And that's a slightly different thing.
I just don't like the idea of...
so contrived to interview people and then...
to interview people and then ask them
to sort of fix all these
or perhaps they're going to take more people from the Mail and the Telegraph and places like that. And you know, I don't think you can really create that kind of balance. It's kind of a false thing. The world isn't really about that.
But you see, that's what I like about working here. Despite what people on Twitter say and all the rest of it, is they all say, well, you all use all this right-wing... I've never worked anywhere before where people so openly disagree with each other.
Exactly. That's honestly the truth about GB News, and I work with lots of different channels. You can actually say what you want here. Yeah. And that's the irony of people telling us that we're raving right-wingers. No.
Crazy,
can we go to this miracle story? Because this is something worth celebrating as well. It was a family who were flying on a small Cessna aircraft, I think, over the jungle in, Chile, was it?
Southern Colombia.
And the plane crashed.
Plane crashed on the 1st of May. The mother, the pilot and another adult on board were killed.
So all the adults were killed?
All the adults were killed. 4 children. Honestly, this gives me goosebumps. 4 children were lost, couldn't be found. 40 days later, they've just been found. They were 13, 9, 4 and 10 to 12 months, because they've been lost for nearly 2 months. This baby and all the children survived. It's absolute. And they have this code word, the army code word, when they were looking for them, was miracle. So they said miracle 4 times, 4 children. So beautiful.
The code
4
word
children
meant
found alive.
We found them and we found them alive.
4 of them.
And they had to say miracle 4 times.
I know, and apparently the little girl, the 13-year-old little girl, had learnt sort of survival strategies from her grandmother. She knew about certain fruits, berries, poisons that you couldn't eat. The children have been found. They look pretty, you know, they are dehydrated, they're emaciated, all of that.
But they're alive. You know, 2 months later, they're alive.
The baby... I mean, I've got a 2-year-old and I don't know how he would survive for half an hour in the kitchen, let alone 40 days in the jungle at the age of 10 to 12 months. He had his first birthday, effectively, in the jungle. And they found them, they're OK. You know, they cut bits up and made little shelters and... this is really
she knew what fruit
miracle.
to feed her siblings, so they obviously survived on fruit. But that jungle also has tigers in it and poisonous snakes.
Really, really dangerous. Alligators, jaguars and anacondas. Poisonous insects.
It's a remarkable story.
It is.
They're going to make a movie out of
that.
But
it's such a miracle, but then you think... And they've lost their mother.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. We've got to leave it there. Fraser, Emma, thank you both very much indeed. Let's just run through the top stories this morning.
Well, the Prime Minister is being urged to call a snap general election after 3 MP resignations have left Rishi Sunak facing by-election battles. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, of course, says the PM must finally find a backbone and send the country to the polls after the Prime Minister has now found himself 3 MPs down in the space of 24 hours.
Manchester City fans still celebrating this morning, quite rightly, after lifting the Champions League trophy for the first time. This was Manchester last night as Rodri put City in front in the second half and they held on for the win against Inter Milan. And of course, it's historic because they're now only the second English team to complete the historic treble.
And more thunderstorms and temperatures of up to 32 degrees are forecast today after the hottest day of the year yesterday. A yellow warning for thunder is in place until 9 o'clock tonight for Wales, Northern Ireland and most of Western and Central England. The Met Office says most of the UK is going to meet heatwave criteria next week.
Now let's get the latest showbiz with Miss Stephanie Tetchy. Good morning. Let's talk ITV, should we? And Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah, it's crunch time for ITV this Wednesday because their ITV's chief executive, Dame Caroline McCall, will be facing questions from the Culture, Media and Sports Committee about the duty of care when it came to the Philip Schofield scandal and with involving the young runner. But this week, Rebecca Ferguson has come out and said that, you know, contestants on shows such as X Factor, Love Island, Britain's Got Talent, they have been mentally abused, bullied. She feels like the culture has been toxic. Stuff that she raised to Dame Caroline McCall, which apparently she just kind of fobbed off to her deputy. So now the chair, Dame Caroline Dinage, she's come out and said that also reality TV shows will come under investigation this Wednesday as a part of that probe.
There's something very odd about it all, actually. The way, I mean...
It's about time it was investigated properly, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like it's been swept underneath the carpet for so many years. There's been so many rumours in the industry, including Rebecca Ferguson, who's always spoke about X Factor and how she felt like she was treated. She says if you've come from a certain background, she feels like they were just kind of looked down on and just kind of used as puppets. You know, reality shows are for the public's entertainment, but then I don't like the feeling that there's these contestants who are leaving with these mental issues which are not being explored.
Yeah.
Well, the television company has a duty of care.
They do.
To not only provide big viewing figures for the channel, but frankly, they need to look after everybody involved. And this came up during the recent case this morning.
It does, because it kind of feels sometimes like, especially with reality TV shows, it feels like it's 15 minutes of fame. Like, they have all the spotlight on them when they're on the show, but when they leave, it's like, what do they do then if they haven't won the show and they've, you know, under intense media scrutiny? But The Sun are also reporting today that ITV have actually pulled up their socks, in particular with the Philip Schofield's case, and the production staff on This Morning have actually been offered counselling. So they are starting to listen to all these kind of news stories.
I do wonder, I don't want to be critical of anyone particularly, but there's got to be an element of self-awareness with this as well, hasn't there? These people who go on reality TV, it's like, what do they expect? Because obviously the vast majority of them aren't going to win. Their fame or whatever that they're going to get is going to disappear very quickly. So it's like, what do they expect is going to happen?
I know, and it's like it's a beast almost. Like, you know, these reality TV stars, when they come out, they're going to get the campaigns, they'll get the social media partnerships and all that stuff, and they get thrown a lot of money at them quite quickly. And then afterwards, it's not something that's long-lasting. Like, you know, when you see Hollywood stars who've had 30, 40 years careers, it's because they've invested a lot into it, and it's been a slow burner. But with reality TV stars, it's like fast food. Quick in,
but they cast them as well. I mean, they don't just pick them at random, they are cast. So they deliberately go for somebody who's, you know, obnoxious and brassy and full of themselves. And they'll also go for people who are slightly vulnerable and maybe, you know, who give you good television value. And that's where they have a duty of care, because you can be seen to be exploiting people like that if they're not careful.
And it's all full clickbait, and it's all to get viewers in. And I think now that we've had this transparency since the whole Philip Schofield case, I think viewers now know what's happening behind the scenes, and now it's a bigger issue, where before a lot of companies were just sweeping it underneath the carpet.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting issue. Stephanie, thank you very much. Thank you for cheering us up this morning with the outfit.
I feel like a ray of sunshine.
You are a ray of sunshine. Honestly,
indeed.
you are. Look, up next, we've got the latest on the fallout over Boris Johnson's resignation as an MP. This is GB News.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hot and humid is the name of the game throughout Sunday for many of us as we import this rather hot air all the way from southern areas of Europe. There are occluded fronts around, so we are going to see some showers and outbreaks of rain throughout the day as well. Initially across parts of Scotland, and those will be pushing northwards as we head throughout the morning. Elsewhere, it's a generally drier and brighter start with a good amount of sunny intervals, but that sunshine is strong enough to start developing showers, and as we head into the afternoon we could see some particularly heavy ones and thundery ones in the picture. So for parts of western Scotland down into northwest England, Wales and parts of central England as well, we do have a yellow thunderstorm warning out for some heavy downbursts. The temperatures will be climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius once again today across southeastern areas of England. Combine that with the moisture is going to be feeling quite humid for many of us. Those showers will take a little bit of time to eventually die down. Could be still thundery into the evening time, but generally some clear intervals developing overnight, though quite cloudy, misty across some coastal areas. Will be a muggy night for all of us. Temperatures holding up around the mid to high teens, so potentially that it does feel quite uncomfortable for sleeping in places, certainly in those urban areas. Starting off Monday then on a warm theme. Again, we pretty much repeat the situation where we've got some brightness early on, some sunny intervals, but the showers then begin to develop as we head into the afternoon. Like Sunday, they will be hit and miss, so not everyone is going to see them, but where they do occur, you certainly will notice them. There's the risk of hail and strong gusts of winds in association with those as well. Temperatures again climbing towards the mid to high 20s, if not 30 degrees Celsius for some areas once again. As we head towards the middle part of next week, the showers will tend to ease off and we'll see more in the way of drier and sunnier weather for everyone. Temperatures, though, staying in at least the mid to high 20s. Enjoy your day.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock on Sunday, the 11th of June. Today, another one bites the dust. The third Tory MP has resigned, throwing the party into chaos. Or can Rishi Sunak survive another attack from his own side? Manchester City have won their first ever Champions League and the treble after a 1-0 win over Inter Milan last night.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has branded the federal indictment against him as ridiculous and baseless. But will this stop him from running to be the next US president? And the warm and sunny weather is set to continue across the country, but the Met Office is warning of thunderstorms with a risk of flooding.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Before we get into the meat of the programme, we've been asking about wedding dresses because Katie Price is selling her pink one, the one she married Peter Andre in 2005. She tried to raise a bit of cash. We were sort of saying, would you do that? What do you do with your wedding dresses? Maureen has been in touch. Hi, Maureen. And she says, this is my mother at 95 years old, 72 years of marriage. Her carers put her wedding dress on her when they found it. She passed a while ago.
But she looks lovely there.
Still in that wedding. But there can't be many people who still fit in their wedding dress after 72 years.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Bless her.
Oh, that's so nice. And Jill in Northampton says, I got married in 1980 and my dress was the same as Gail's dress in Coronation Street when she got married, when she married Brian. Oh,
I
isn't that
remember
lovely?
that.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And meanwhile, Jenny in Southampton says, when I got divorced, my wedding dress went in a clothing bin and all my wedding pictures went in the bin too.
Oh, well, that's drawing a line under, isn't it? Well,
Meanwhile, you know, we were talking about what is the criteria for a heat wave.
Oh, yes, go on.
It's an extended period of hot weather relative to the expected conditions of the area at that time of year. It's when a location records a period of at least 3 consecutive days where they experience the daily maximum temperatures that the Met Office has already decided is the maximum for where you live. So, for instance, a heatwave criteria would be different in the north of England than it would in London and the southeast, for instance.
Well, that's as clear as mud to me.
So if you lived in London and the southeast, you'd have to have 3 days consecutively of 27 or 28 degrees maximum.
And if you're in the northwest, 3 days of 10 degrees or maximum.
26 and 25 is the north and sort of Midlands-ish. So it's different where you live.
Look, in Barrow-in-Furness, it's a heat wave if you have 3 consecutive days without rain.
A miracle.
There you go.
Never mind a heat wave.
Miracle. Anyway, keep all your thoughts coming through in this last 20 minutes also. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, on to that meat of the programme. As I said, Nigel Adams has become the third Tory MP to resign in just 24 hours following Boris Johnson's resignation.
Yeah, which has obviously prompted a response from Labour. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has called Boris Johnson a coward, saying he should accept the responsibility for his own actions.
Ah, well, is this the end then for Boris Johnson? What does it mean for the Tory party? Camilla Tominey is here. Good morning to you.
Rubbing my hands together with glee at this story. Although it came a little late in the day on Friday. The whole Telegraph office was in
we woke up to
a state of chaos.
It would be. It would be.
But, I mean, as ever, it's the Boris show in the papers today before us, isn't it? And so it needs to be analysed from both sides. The coverage ranges... It's as polarising, actually, as the opinions of the former Prime Minister, right? So the coverage ranges from Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's going to be coming on the show a little later, revering him as a future... Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you, Anne. Revering him as a sort of future leader of the Conservative Party, which may leave many people scratching their heads going, how have you worked that one out? All the way to Keir Starmer in the Mirror calling for a general election now.
Yes.
I mean, you could argue that both pieces are perhaps equally deluded. We're not going to have a...
And also, some of the papers are saying Boris should be the next Prime Minister, he's going to find a way back in.
Yes.
And others are saying, you know, it's caused total civil war and he'll never see the Tory party again.
I mean, the psychodrama continues, right? I don't think it's any secret that there is a huge amount of animosity, and it's reflected in some of the reports today, between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. I mean, Boris Johnson just cannot get over the fact that Rishi Sunak knifed him by resigning last July, which was the final nail in the Boris coffin, right, as far as his premiership was concerned. I think he feels he's the victim, not just of this conspiracy that he's talking about in Parliament with regard to kind of Remainers and Labour MPs, his own MPs. I'm going to have one of his critics on, Tobias Elwood. We'll get his view of things, because he'll probably be rubbing his hands together with glee that Boris is no longer going to be in Parliament. So he's talking about being the victim of this conspiracy sort of among other opposition MPs. But there's this sense that he thinks he's the victim of a conspiracy at the heart of Number 10. If you also look at the Cabinet Office's involvement in his WhatsApp messages and the inquiry, is this a really shrewd move where he's just managed to wipe the slate clean? Whatever happens with the Privileges Committee report now, it's not going to have any potency. He could just bide his time, wait for Rishi Sunak to lose these 3 by-elections and ride back in like a knight on a white horse.
Yeah, how would he get back into...
Well, he would need... say if they lost mid-beds to Labour, which is a 26,000 majority, so that would be catastrophic for the Tories. He can then perhaps come in and propose himself as the candidate for the general election for that seat. It's just a theory. With Nadine's support, she's been an MP there for a long time, so she's popular. There is a piece on the Mail on Sunday today saying that people in mid-beds would like Boris to be their MP. Maybe not now, because I think what he's waiting for is Rishi Sunak's premiership to be even more undermined, not only by by-election defeats, but also by losing the general election, potentially. And if that does look like it has potential to happen, that, I think, is when Sir Jacob is talking about him riding back in Churchillian to lead the party in opposition.
Doesn't it sound like they're all... I mean, Boris and these other MPs now who are quitting, Nadine and the other one who we've not heard of.
Nigel Adams.
Nigel Adams, he's the one. They're throwing the toys out the pram, aren't they? And if they're sort of saying, well, ultimately Boris's goal is for the Tories to be kicked out of government so he can then get back in as leader of the opposition. I mean, that all seems a bit narcissistic.
But it's not quite the rebellion he might have hoped for, because there's a little bit of talk in the papers, there'll be a couple of more that are going to resign. I'm going to ask Sir Jacob, well, why aren't you resigning then if you're backing him? We've also got, this is the other interesting factor, Nigel Farage is coming on, and I'm obviously going to be asking him, well, where does this leave you and your own political ambitions and indeed the Brexit project? Could he go into some kind of partnership with Boris Johnson? I mean, I'm going to ask that on the right, because at the end of the day, imagine that combination. I know it sounds completely beyond the realms of possibility, but I'm going to ask Nigel this. That heady combination of Nigel being quite hard on immigration and Boris appealing to a more sort of less immigration-focused, more intellectualised Brexit voter does pose a significant threat to Rishi Sunak. And Reform aren't doing it at the moment, and I need to push Nigel. We know he's here and doing his thing for us, and that's brilliant, but is he going to return to the political fray? So I'm going to just be asking him to nail his colours to the mast.
That would be interesting, though, wouldn't it? Because the dynamic of that, because we know that they'd fight like... They might get a lot done, but they'd also fight like cat and dog, wouldn't they?
Well, I was also thinking, is the...
I know Nigel's out there listening.
He is listening. But can any party take on the personalities that are Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, but then they work together very well in the Leave campaign? Look, it's just a question. It's a jam-packed show, because as well as those great guests, I've got Barry Gardiner coming in for Labour. He's a veteran MP, so
he's brave.
Well, to be fair, let's hear what they think about what should happen to this Privileges Committee report now. There's talk about Boris Johnson having his pass to Parliament revoked. And I'm going to be joined by Yuri Sak, who's one of President Zelensky's military advisors, to find out what's going on in Kherson. And I'm going to be joined by Mick Mulvaney, former Trump advisor, about what on earth's going on with the former president and whether it affects his electoral ambitions. So we're packing in a lot from 9:30 to 11.
Yes. So star-studded guest
Doesn't it seem like, though, there's... I mean, I know they're different, but both sides of the Atlantic, it's this, this witch hunt, supposedly, against former leaders. It all seems to be with similar hairstyles.
With similar hairstyles, although only one has ennobled their hairdresser this week.
Yes.
I say ennobled, honoured.
Honoured.
Fair play. I mean, that lady does have quite a task on her hands, and
it's very brave.
She has been...
I feel a bit torn about that, because I know Kelly really well.
Do you?
I've known her for years, and she's a parliamentary hairdresser. She's been there for years, running in Westminster. But I do know, I shouldn't say, but she does Boris's hair nicely, and then he immediately
roughs it up. But anybody in telly will tell you that makeup artists have tried to order the hair, and as soon as he goes on air, he wants it right. To be fair, final thought, why shouldn't these honours go to people like hairdressers who have served for 30 years in Parliament. I mean, we look at that resignation honours list, another question I'll be asking my guests, you know, should we have these honours at all? They're very self-indulgent, aren't they? But in the case of Kelly, maybe that one's deserved.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
She's the most sensible person
Some
on
of
the
them
list.
are cronies. Some of them are clearly cronyism, and it gives everybody a sort of bad name, a tainted.
We'll have to try and get Kelly in on the show, shouldn't we?
I think
She's
we
lovely,
should.
actually.
She works in Parliament doing
so she runs the salon in Parliament. She does all the
But
hairs.
how many stories does Kelly have?
Oh, yes, because hairdressers always hear of it.
Let me say, lots and lots. Not repeatable. Anyway, there you go. We'll see you at 9:30.
Great stuff.
Look forward to it.
Coming up, the Met Office has issued another yellow weather warning for thunderstorms covering most of the country. Are you prepared? And how do you prepare? This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
(9:14). Good morning to you. Now, an artist in Gloucester has been busy converting the streets where she lives into a massive explosion of colour.
She's called Tash Fruitco, and she's been painting Gloucester houses for 5 years now, not just apparently adding value to those houses, but to the community itself.
Our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, went to meet her.
Walk around Gloucester, and it won't be long before you come across a Tash Fruitco painting. You may even live in one.
And it was mainly because people don't like how the city looks. So it made total sense to me to paint the houses on the streets that I owned houses on. So I just started knocking on residents' doors and asking if I could paint their house.
Tash is a property developer with an artistic bent and a passion for colour.
Overwhelmingly positive. People are absolutely loving what we are doing for the city, bringing joy, colour, creativity, and honestly, it's a massive positive boost to most people's days.
It's a boost to residents' bank balances too. Properties on these streets have increased in value by a whopping 30%. But it's not just the rise in value that's important, it's the value of the community itself. When all of the houses are painted different colours, the neighbours can't help but come together. It's really brought a sense of community to this street. Mark, whose house is bright blue, says he's never been so popular.
It seems to have got us more like my friends, because half of them we didn't seem to know, but now the streets come together, we seem to know a lot more people.
When I walk past with my husband, I say, oh, I like the colour, I like that colour. But now I think it make feel like fresh. Yeah, people feel like, oh, fresh.
Hopewell Street in the Barton and Tredworth area of the city is Tash's biggest project yet, 63 houses. It's her 5th transformation in the city. Until recently, the artist has been self-funding her work, but now she's received a lottery grant and there's no stopping her.
As a creative, having a whole city to decorate is an absolute dream, and I see everywhere as a canvas. And to be able to see places looking their best really makes me super happy.
And that's some canvas. In a city of 60,000 houses, Tash will be painting up a storm for many years to come. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Now, when I was looking at this in our running order, I thought, I'm going to hate this. I'm going to have to sit here and smile and pretend I like it, but I'm going to hate this. Some woman just painting houses, bright colours.
And what is your verdict?
It looks really good.
It does, doesn't it? But do you know what struck me?
I'm surprised.
Because I thought about this before as well, is there she was standing there with that lovely row of gloriously colourful houses behind her. The cars are all really boring silver or dull, muted colours. Why don't we decorate our cars?
Because you'd never sell them.
No, you would in the end, wouldn't you? No, I mean...
Oh, you mean if you bought them with...
Why are cars sold in boring colours? Why don't we have decorated cars? It would make everything look a bit brighter and nicer, wouldn't it?
It would be... yeah, I don't know. I think you'd go off it a bit. You go off it a bit.
You wouldn't go off a house, but you'd go off a decorated car.
But it's easy to decorate the house. It'd be much easier than trying to flog a car with a daisy on it or something. Or a bright purple car. Sometimes you see those very expensive cars that people have custom colours in, like the lime green, like a lime green Lamborghini or something like that.
Yeah, a bright orange Maserati or something. It was absolutely glorious colour.
Well, they do look great, but you just sort of think, yeah, I'd be bored of it in 6 months. I'd want something... See, my car's grey.
Great, well, there you go.
I like it.
Mine's dark blue.
No,
but I just wonder, yeah, it looks all right if it's totally clean and the sun's shining on it, but... I just wonder why we don't have more decorated cars.
I don't know. It could be a thing.
In the hippie swinging 60s, we used to buy old Volkswagens, didn't we, and put, flowers all over them.
Yeah, they looked great, didn't they?
I don't know. It's just struck me that there she had gone to all that effort to make the houses look lovely, but the cars were all very boring.
Well, look, there's a project there. Diamond Motors.
I don't think so. I've got better things to do.
I can paint your car pink if you like, darling.
Don't think so.
You're right. Never know. Might work. Don't know why they're laughing at me nowadays. I was very good. It was all right, darling.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Pink, 500 quid.
Forget how I ever said it.
I don't know. It could work. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Meanwhile, what are you planning to do this afternoon?
Ooh,
sit in the garden. I'm going to just sit in the garden.
I had a barbecue last night.
Ah, lovely.
That was just nice.
It's the right weather for it.
It was really lovely, yeah.
What do you put on a barbecue as a veggie?
As a veggie, well, veggie sausages and veggie burgers and all that. Cut them from frozen, though, for the veggie stuff.
Is that better?
Yeah, because then you get it nice and crisp on the outside, but moist on the inside.
Because cooking anything veggie is different from cooking a steak or something, isn't it? Very different.
But anyway, it worked.
Anyway,
nice.
I'm thinking of going home and doing an ice cream float.
Oh, yes. Tell them what you want in it.
Well, you usually do an ice cream float with vanilla ice cream and sort of Coke.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know what it would taste like if you bunged a Bacardi in there as well. I'll tell you next weekend.
Better. I should do better.
No.
Better.
You'd feel probably more happy about it afterwards.
You would, yeah.
I'll have a go.
I think you should. It'd be very good.
But I've never heard of alcoholic milk ice cream floats. No. There's probably a reason.
Again, this could be another business opportunity.
I don't think so. I just want to sit there and enjoy.
Drop Bacardi in that, darling.
Any white rum will do.
Oh, there you go. Now, of course, it has been very warm in
warm.
many towns and cities, but more places are likely to see those thunderstorms
That'll
today.
scupper my idea of an afternoon in the garden. The Met Office has issued another yellow weather warning for thunderstorms covering a large part of the country, and that will run from midday till about 9 p.m.
Let's talk to our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. Morning, Will. I mean, it looks so beautiful where you are. What are they expecting there?
Good morning. Yes, it's strange to be talking about warnings for thunderstorms when you've got the beautiful River Trent in the background here in Nottingham. Occasionally you might see a swan swim past, or maybe even the local rowing team, and a very persuasive trainer, we'll say, riding along the side on a bicycle with a megaphone shouting at them to go faster or to tighten their elbows. But of course, when you do have hot temperatures, there is also the added risk of thunderstorms. There are two things that you're being warned about today when it comes to the weather. One is the amber heat health alert. That's for places like the East Midlands, where I am right now, the West Midlands, as well as the East of England and Southern England. That's been in place since Friday, and that's going to go right until Tuesday at around 9 a.m. after the UK Health Security Agency extended it because they expected it to be as hot as it has been. We saw temperatures of 32 degrees, and it's an amber heat health alert, particularly because it's likely to be felt across the whole health service and the wider population, not just the most vulnerable. That's a quote from the UK HSA. And when they talk about the most vulnerable, they particularly mean people over the age of 65, people with respiratory diseases or with cardiovascular diseases. So those are the most vulnerable. So they're saying it could really affect everyone when we have hot temperatures like this. Now, the other part of it is the yellow weather warning that's been put out by the Met Office for thunderstorms. The Met Office's chief meteorologist, Frank Saunders, said the heat will last for a few more days at least. Sunday we'll see 30 degrees again in southern England, and the risk of thunderstorms spreads across the UK. So when there's a risk of thunderstorms, it's really a warning, but it can hit quite heavily, quite quickly. So the risk is, of course, of localized flooding. There's also a risk for disruption to travel and maybe even some power outages. But it's very difficult to say exactly where that might happen. There's currently 14 flood warnings, flood alerts in place. So they're really advising to be aware of what's going on when you are spending your time out in the sun today.
Lovely. Will, thank you very much
lovely.
indeed. Yeah, we do all need to be a bit careful, a bit wary of it all today, just in case you could be caught out in a shower. But there's anything else.
Yeah, it's obviously warming up there because Will rarely takes his jacket off.
It's very true. It's very
so it must
true.
be getting quite warm.
Very
but where he
risque.
is, you see, for instance,
Oh, yes.
they would have to have 3 consecutive days of at least 26 degrees to qualify as a heat wave.
Oh.
But apparently that's going to happen to lots of areas around the country next week.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. Just a quick one to end on wedding dresses. Irene, morning, Irene. I still have my wedding dress. We've been married 55 years, still love each other and look after each other. My dress was second-hand, homemade, didn't cost a bomb. but I loved it. And that's what matters.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks for your company today. We'll see you next week. But up next, it's the Camilla Tominey Show.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hot and humid is the name of the game throughout Sunday for many of us as we import this rather hot air all the way from southern areas of Europe. There are occluded fronts around, so we are going to see some showers and outbreaks of rain throughout the day as well. Initially across parts of Scotland, and those will be pushing northwards as we head throughout the morning. Elsewhere, it's a generally drier and brighter start with a good amount of sunny intervals, but that sunshine is strong enough to start developing showers, and as we head into the afternoon we could see some particularly heavy ones and thundery ones in the